XP to level 3, there's a link in the description below. So I decided I wanted to run an experiment.
Hello?
I unearthed
The
the
Streamlabs
adventure,
crashed.
sat down and read it, did my research.
It's probably tired of my
And
shit.
I wanted to run it again and see if I was missing something. I changed parts of it in the past, but what would
The
happen
game
if I
also
added one
crashed.
word
Okay.
that wasn't supposed to be done? Sort of. Gygax said that this dungeon is for players who think their characters are invincible. So I decided to run it for my friends and told them to make the most overpowered broken PCs they could. They were level 20, and we made our journey back into this godforsaken place. If you want to watch the whole VOD of this train wreck, it's up on Arcane Arcade, my second channel where we stream D&D. Now, before we get into breaking down this tomb, let me just say that I have a love for these old TSR adventures. I don't have nostalgia for them
Oh,
necessarily.
sorry,
Because I
Pistachio.
didn't play the game back
I'm
then.
just
I
gonna...
wasn't even alive back then. I'm a young boy. But I like the idea of these old adventures being kind of a different game.
No, I think I'm gonna stop playing for now.
Is a lot of fun to run for me. There was a different way to write adventures back then, and I think it's fun to kind of translate that to now and reminisce about the past. Now, I'm praising this right now because I'm about to completely not praise it and tear it a new devil's mouth. Anyways, the first room of the Tomb of Horrors is getting into the damn thing. There's basically a plateau with rocks on top of it that are shaped like skulls and nowhere else to go. What the adventure says that they must do to get into one of the
jack-o'-lantern mouth is so cute. No, maybe I'm gonna doodle for a bit. Maybe I'm gonna doodle for a bit.
Has a crumbling cliff of sand and gravel about 20 feet high in the middle of the hole. And it takes 10 minutes for each character to search each 10-foot wide space along the cliff. This examination must be done from a distance using a long spear or 10-foot pole to poke around the sand and gravel, looking for an opening. Any prodding into the cliff face
Okay,
must be
just a
sufficiently hollow
second.
for it to collapse enough material to expose a portion of the tunnel entrance. Once an entrance is exposed, it takes about an hour for characters to thoroughly clear the passage that lies beyond, but a crawl space can be opened in 10 minutes. What I gather from this is that they have to go up to the cliff face and kind of dig around to find it. Now, there's 3 different entrances. One of them is a falling ceiling trap, the other is a sliding wall trap, and the middle is the real entrance. The middle entrance is a long hallway with floor traps whose placement makes no sense and are a real hassle to deal with. There's a chest in the wall on a painted door that's a trap and also a real door.
Okay.
It's a chest trap door, not door, but actually a door. We'll get back to that. A misty doorway that teleports you either into a room with levers or further into the dungeon.
I do like this person's videos. I subscribed to them a long time ago. I think maybe back when she was like the wrong gender, so I didn't recognize her at first, but then YouTube just decided not to show me anything. Okay, hold on, I gotta get my phone so I can still see chat, because the video window takes this up. Are you done charging, little phone? Do you have a good break? Okay, back to work phone. Oh, my ice pack ran out of ice.
Post Void. Now this is an interesting game. It's a perfect example of something that I've been very into lately. Punk rock game design.
Oh, fuck yeah.
I don't mean just the look of this game. This thing looks like a million different stickers I've seen on the bottom of skateboards. It looks like the Malibu Kin album art.
Yes, and I love that.
Mad magazine cover. But when I say punk rock game design, I'm talking about breaking the rules.
This is a laptop. It has a bad cooling system.
Everything from Wolfenstein 3D to Half-Life.
Yep, I just literally use ice packs.
Something to teach us about how FPS games.
I mean, it helps.
Clear visual design that puts broadcasting information to the player above anything else. Intuitive level design that subconsciously guides the player through a space.
Oh wait, I gotta
psychological tools to draw on. Highs and lows in the pacing, which give the player particularly memorable moments where they really had to bring their A game to survive. Clear but minimalistic HUDs that the player can read subconsciously while focusing on something else, all while not taking up too much of the screen. I could go on and on. The point is, modern FPS games have gotten very sophisticated. I've been loving the Quake remaster as much as anyone else, but there's something to be said for these modern games where it feels like every little aspect probably took weeks of planning to fine-tune. It's a heritage that's been passed down and refined from game to game for 30-some years. Post Void doesn't care about any of that, though. It breaks the rules. It's difficult to tell what's going on at any moment, especially in the later levels. It's not clear at all what the optimal playstyle is for your first hour or two. You have to genuinely stop focusing on combat for a second to glean anything even remotely precise from this health meter in your hand. Other than north, there's basically no way of interpreting which way you should be going. You'll just have to be good at maintaining direction in a game space. The only break that you get from being at 100% tension is
Why is it so quiet? Oh.
complicated than that. Point is, if you showed this game
I
to
had it at
Mr.
a different
Nolan from
setup
Dead
for
Poets
the
Society,
other
he'd tell you that
stream.
it was worthless and amateurish. But I've said before that the #1 thing I'm
Test,
looking for in
test,
media
okay.
is to feel things that I haven't felt before and can't feel anywhere else. And Post Void takes me there in a very serious way. I've had very minor panic attacks while playing this game. I've gone totally silent on my friends in VC for like an hour straight, just dead focused on the action. I get all twitchy when I play it, I wipe my nose like a crackhead for the split seconds I get to take my hands off the keyboard. There's just no way to make a human connect with this game
on
other than
here?
just letting the whole thing wash over you and letting yourself disappear into it. You kind of just have to forfeit your mind and body to the game's insanity if you want to do well and stay calm while you do it. Sure, you can get awful RNG from
That
time
later.
to time, but almost all of my game overs are, at the end of the day, caused by me feeling something or thinking something that was external to the game, pulling myself out of the experience for that 16th of a second. So, what's the point of all of this? Artistically, I mean. You've got to have a reason to break the rules, right?
Nope. Hey, stop. Play.
Otherwise you're just being subversive for the sake of being subversive. Well, I've got a reading on this game that I really like, but first, let's do something that you don't really get a lot of chances to do while you're actually playing the game. Breathe, and take in what the hell is going on. There's going to be spoilers from here on out, so if you need a recommendation for the game, let this be it. Basically, you're just some businessman-looking guy running through a series of gaudily decorated home interiors with the garish wallpaper and the awful couches and everything. You're being attacked by other businessmen, maybe gangsters, telephones, light bulbs, and a couple other weird enemies that sort of fit into that same homey aesthetic.
Hell
And
yeah.
your ultimate goal is to get through all of this chaos into a garden where you can pour the contents of your skull into the soil to create a flower.
Hell yeah.
So that's what we, the players, see happen over the course of a successful run. Seems kind of vague. But luckily, once you beat the tutorial, we get a little poem of sorts that sheds some light on what all of this means. First, there was the void. Then there was a headache, and a flower of hope that would give birth to a sanctuary. With his head in his hand, he who bore the pain would try to reach the void again. The place where nothing moves, where darkness is lord and silence is its preacher, a place of peace. There his head can pour freely onto a new seed, which, with renewed purpose, will sprout life. But alas, ceaseless violence and unapologetic noise would again be wallpapered to the corridors of past serenity, a time known as post-void, a place known as post-void. Analyzing this poem,
I
it
love it
sounds to me
already.
like we have some guy, or player character, living in blissful ignorance of the world around him, peacefully existing in a mental void. First there was a void. Then he got a headache, bringing him to a mental time and place known as post-void, what came after his void. Suddenly, all of these familiar things in his life turned into just more fuel for the headache, and all he wants is to survive it all for long enough to get back into his void, the
Oh, I
place
know
of
that
peace
feel.
where nothing moves. Put as literally as possible, a guy, let's say someone who got fed up with his office job, decided to quit so that he could go into the woods and stare at a flower and forget the world around him. I'm not going to get so literal that I say that it's definitely about a guy who worked in an office getting fed up with the monotony. He could be a gangster who suddenly realized how bad his organization was, or someone who's sick of telemarketers bothering him at home. He can be whoever you want him to be. I'm pretty sure everybody has felt like this character at one point or another. But anyways, that frustration and headache is what all of the chaos, and let's be real, headache fuel in this game symbolizes, and what all of this violence symbolizes. Think
Yeah,
about what happens
Kind
when
of
you're fighting
visually
in this game.
overwhelming, huh?
When you get shot, you lose some of the goo in your skull. You confronted one of these symbols of your life, and the headache got worse. And when you kill an enemy, you regain some of the skull goo, and the headache is resisted for a moment. Eventually, after countless attempts, you manage to control the headache long enough to get to your flower. You were
It's
in
just
the
what the
void,
world
then
looks
the
like when you
headache
have a
came,
really
bringing
bad
you to the
migraine.
post-void, and now you're finally back in the void again.
Get that
But
aura.
it doesn't really end there, does it? This is an arcade-style roguelike. You're meant to be going for that high score and playing again and again. Getting to the ending your first time, that's just one step in your mastery of a game like this. Sooner or later, you're going to return to the post-void, and the headache will be back. Just beating this game once doesn't change anything. This is all still incredibly headache-inducing. It's still the post-void, and it still exists just to melt your brain. But now we know that there's a peaceful ending in sight if we can do well enough. I'm gonna stick with the businessman version of this game's metaphor because that's the one I personally relate to. But this moment, when we've beaten the game and we come back for more, is when the metaphor transforms a little bit. It stops being about that guy giving up on modern life to live in the woods or whatever, and turns into a guy just trying to survive each day so that he can go back home or go back to sleep or whatever. Each attempt is just another day in the office, quote-unquote. Some day you make it through the day and sleep well. Most times you feel like you're going crazy by the time it's over. Starting a new run after successfully completing one is also when the objective of the game changes, and it changes in a way that reflects how the metaphor changed. Before, we were just trying to get to the end by any means necessary. Now we're trying to do it in style, so that we can get the best score. Up until I had my first successful run, I swore by the Uzi with the rubber bullets and exploding enemies strategy. I'd just mindlessly spray around every corner and most enemies would be dead by the time they became a threat. It's effective, but it's sloppy and it won't get you a good score. Your accuracy rating will be pure garbage. Now, I like to use the knife and get right in the enemy's face. It's quick, clean, and effective, but even more than with the other strategies, you really need to let the headache wash over you for it to work. You just have to become a machine, holding and releasing the left mouse button to the mechanical rhythm of the corridors you walk in. No time to think, no time to worry, no time to feel. After doing this for long enough, you might start getting to the point where you instantly click on the upgrade you want without thinking about it, or taking a second to check your phone or scratch your nose. You won't blink or visibly move at all when you die and your frustration is met with a seizure-inducing flash of colors. You'll just instantly click on the retry button and keep going as if nothing had happened. If you play this, or really any game long enough, you can train yourself to just be an unfeeling zombie, mindlessly reacting to stimuli like Brukenenko's dog. That is, if you ask me, the true
Game
ending to
about
this
headaches
game.
gives you
This is a
headaches.
game that practically exists just to get a reaction out of you. Looking at it is kind of difficult. Playing it is intense and heart-pounding, your hands get all twitchy, your
Real
words
footage
turn
of the
into short
Activision
little
Blizzard
caveman
office.
grunts. It definitely can give you a
Colorized,
headache. In
1812.
my case, it tended to trigger my vertigo pretty badly if I played for too long. Much like the monotony of life, it's stressful and anxiety-inducing and kind of makes you feel like you're going crazy. That's what being in the post-void is all about. But if you play this game for long enough, eventually you just become that zombie. You don't care when you die, or when you get bad RNG and can't get the upgrades you were planning on. You don't get excited about getting to the end, or getting a new high score, or any of that. You're just a zombie, but a zombie that's at peace. If you get to this point, congratulations. You don't feel anything. You've turned the post-void back into the void. You've learned how to survive modern life. You've brought the void with you, and in doing so, destroyed the very concept of post-void.
But is that encouraging or kind of depressing? Oof, the wind outside, oh my god.
Before I close out this week's video and get back to work on the biggest project I've ever started, I'd like to go ahead and verbally thank the patrons, especially those who are donating $10 or more monthly, such as Ada Avery, Almost Dead Again, Anatoly Volnov, Andrew Melnick, Benny, Big Time Jim, Bobby Blitz, CJ Keene, Celadon, Chompy Uwu, Christopher Pinar, Colin Gajic, Cornelius Nelson, Darius Fazier, David Kaiser, Demise, Dennis Voshakamer, Dominic Johan, Duncan Bristow, Fralum, IJK, Jack Eisenberg, Kenneth Enfinger, Laffy, Mixer Rules, Neurofilter, Of Lucian, PJ, Raptor, Raxvan, Robert Boateng, Scotty from Marketing, CeeLo,
Yeah, Scotty from Marketing.
Vivian Cox, What's Rozzy, Keen Vo, Yemen Shi, and Zyrobly. I know it's been a long time since my last upload, and you were probably expecting more than, a 12-minute video, but that is because I just finished a 60-page script, which adds up to a little over a 2-hour-long video, by far the biggest thing I've ever written, on the entire Metal Gear Solid series, and I'm going to need a lot of time to edit that together, so there's probably going to be a couple smaller videos like this in the interim. Anyways, thanks for sticking with me, and have a great week. Rarely in my entire life have I ever seen humanity depicted in a worse situation than it's in Half-Life 2.
Scotty from Marketing. Bro.
That might seem ridiculous to say. Half-Life 2 isn't all that gritty a game, but hear me out. Because while we only see a small fraction of this world over our time with Gordon, Like everything in Half-Life, the implications behind the things we see tell us so many things about the Combine. Let's start at the beginning.
No matter how many times I've been relocated, I never get used to it.
No matter how many times I get relocated, I never get used to it. There are a wealth of details in this first chapter, point insertion, but let's start with this. Relocation. All we know so far is that this guy is getting relocated over and over again. As we move through the first chapter, we see that this is happening to everyone.
They're always departing, but they never arrive. And the ones that do arrive, they never leave. You never see them go. They're always full. No one ever gets on, but they're always departing, but they never arrive.
Every single person in this world is being moved from city to city over and over again. Some philosopher somewhere in history probably gave this a name, but let's call it civil confusion. Like that guy on the train said, he never gets used to it. This is one of the Combine's many ways of keeping people complacent and stopping them from formulating a plan or even thinking about formulating a plan. As soon as the Combine had established power, it did the #1 thing it needed to do to stop people from resisting. They broke up the families and the friend groups. Every single person we see here is living amongst a bunch of total strangers, and if it weren't for Gordon, they'd be surrounded by a totally new group of strangers by this time next month, just as they were last month.
Yeah, fucking up a person's social ties is bad stuff.
This is my 3rd transfer this year.
Just for a second, imagine what this must be like for these citizens. We don't spend enough time with any of them to really hear how hard it's been on them, but if you've ever moved to a new area away from your friends, or suddenly been put in a new school full of strangers, well, that feeling is their entire life, only they don't know if their families are alive. All they know is that even if the Combine were to miraculously fall, they'll probably never see them again. These citizens, they'll never be able to settle down no matter what happens. That right there is how you control a population so that they die quietly. The Combine, though, they sure don't stop there. I mean, listen to what this woman says.
Are you the only ones on that train?
On your way to parts unknown. Welcome.
Overwatch stopped our train in the woods and took my husband for questioning. They said he'd be on the next train. I'm not sure when that was. They're being nice, though, letting me wait for him.
This woman's significant other, through a mistake in bureaucracy, ended up on the same train as her, and so the Combine stopped the train and took him away, probably to be executed, now that he's been reminded of what he has to fight for, and odds are very good that the same will happen to her once they get around to it. This is a seriously bad situation. So how else do you promote civil confusion? Well, as we see here, the Combine take the personal effects of everybody every time they're moved. We see abandoned luggage all over the place at this train station.
I see they took your suitcase too. They can't get away with this much longer.
I mean, hell, when we get into the back room behind Barney's interrogation chamber, we see a huge pile of confiscated luggage to no doubt be incinerated as soon as they get around to it. You have absolutely nothing beyond what the Combine gives you. No family, no friends, no clothes, no medicine, no personal mementos, nothing. You couldn't carry a drawing that your deceased child drew you without it being ripped out of your hands and torn apart as soon as a CP unit decides to search you. Oh, and your child is deceased. The Combine set up a suppression field that stops embryonic development, not just in the cities, but everywhere on Earth. We even hear the ghostly echoes of children's laughter if we get close enough to this playground.
Ew.
Humanity will, as it is when we start Half-Life 2, never have another generation. The entire species is on death's door. Well, if humanity is angry enough, people will plan some sort of rebellion, regardless of how little time you give them to get acquainted with their surroundings. Word will get out, and people will start to plan something, regardless of what you do.
Humans are
So, how do we
resilient.
further this control? Well, ruthless genocide. Remember how this apartment is raided and everybody in it is killed no more than a minute after Gordon steps foot in it? Well, the Combine have some sort of AI that oversees humanity called Overwatch. And, well, listen to what it says here before the CPs start shooting.
Attention residents. Miscounts detected in your block. Cooperation with your citizen protection. Permit full ration reward.
What it's saying here essentially translates to, we have detected one more person in your building than we expected. We'll give you a decent day's meal if you lay down on the ground and confirm your identity with civil protection as soon as they've given the all clear. But, well, that isn't what happens. Everybody's killed immediately, and granted, they didn't comply with what the CP said, but as these two citizens outside of the building said,
They have no reason to come to our place. Don't worry, they'll find one.
These CPs aren't here to neutralize one rogue citizen. They're here to kill everybody, now that their civil status has been infected by a seditious individual. Why do you think they scream "run for your life" as soon as they hear the Overwatch voice? I mean, even before this miscount is detected, we see the CPs raiding an apartment and killing everybody, all because they didn't answer the door quickly enough. So basically, what this all boils down to is, the moment we notice you and everyone you've ever talked to is dead, no questions asked. Good luck inspiring the people around you to resist under those conditions.
What are we going to do?
Not only that, this guy's line,
Don't drink the water. They put something in it to make you forget. I don't even remember how I got here.
implies that at least some of the citizens we see are being drugged up 24 hours a day. They don't even remember that they had a life before the Combine. Honestly, the most unrealistic thing about Half-Life 2 is that anybody managed to escape this system before Gordon. While the Overwatch soldiers we start fighting after we return from Ravenholm are all augmented and have no free will, these CPs who are
I don't
killing
really
all
know
of
if
these
no one else
civilians are
managed to
all
escape.
human, hence Barney is able to be undercover and isn't
I don't know what
brainwashed.
happened to them.
So how the hell does it motivate these CPs to go against their own species? Well, like I said, in this system you have absolutely nothing except for what the Combine gives you. That makes it pretty easy to motivate people to do what you want. So what does it give the CPs? Well, first off, right in the beginning of the game, we hear a citizen at a food line say this.
I don't know about you, but I'm ready to join Civil Protection just to get a decent meal.
We don't know everything about CP coercion, but we've got a couple of other things that we do know. I'm sure a lot of you have heard this line before. I've heard a lot of people say that this is the Combine stimulating the pleasure centers of a CP's brain to create the sensation of sex, but I offer a different explanation. So, first off, the suppression field. Basically, it stops embryonic development in all citizens and makes reproduction impossible. We've already touched on the implications of that, but to me, this means that the Combine would classify sex with a condom or birth control as a non-mechanical reproduction simulation. It's a simulation of reproduction, but without the mechanical element of a sperm cell entering an egg. Alright, so if you do well as a CP, the Combine will let you get your rocks off. What's so bad about that? Well, here, let's just let the CP kill us real quick. Family cohesion preserved. Well, damn, that has some messed up implications. So what you're telling me is that there is a way to see your family in this world. You just have to join the CPs and help them stamp out the last slivers of human ambition. And, well, if you fail in the line of duty, then your family is executed. And before you say that this family cohesion preserved line only means that the CP gets to continue seeing their family, let's look at another line real quick. When a protection team member dies, you'll sometimes hear their squad mates say this.
Engaging protection team is non-cohesive. Reinforcement teams code 3.
Non-cohesive. So cohesion just means that everybody involved in a team is alive. Long story short, every CP that Gordon killed or evaded had their families executed if they had them.
Damn it.
And wrapping around to that non-mechanical reproduction simulation thing, I guess this all boils down to one thing. If a CP is in combat with a high-value target like Gordon, they could either succeed and get to have sex with their spouse, and more importantly see their spouse, or fail and have their family executed, probably along with themselves. Well, what about the bachelors, like Barney probably is? How do we stop more of them from revolting? Easy. Malnourishment. Take a listen to this line that plays when a CP is preparing for combat.
Anti-fatigue ration is now 3 milligrams.
Okay, so it gives them drugs to get them fast and alert before combat. Makes sense, but this is the Combine you're talking about. It's got your life functions monitored. It knows exactly how much energy you need at any given time. It wouldn't surprise me at all if most of these CPs we see in non-confrontational situations like this one were just barely conscious, given just the amount of chemical stimulation they need to continue to shout at civilians and chase them a short distance if anything goes wrong.
Yeah, that's fucked
Remember,
up.
all that Barney did before the uprising was open a door for you and walk to Kleiner's lab. Meanwhile, when this CP is performing the loyalty check on you, his suit probably gave him a slight stim boost from the Overwatch AI just moments before. So basically, you might join the CPs for a promise of a decent meal every now and then, but once you do, the Combine start holding a gun to your family's head. You stay only slightly less malnourished than you were before, and all you have to do to get this upgrade in life is be ready to kill or injure members of your own endangered species at a moment's notice. These guys are so incredibly evil. So that's all how the Combine maintains a nice stockpile of humans to use for whatever purpose, but let's talk about what comes once the humans are dead. The transhumans, and all the other abominable chimera that the Combine manufacture. See, you might occasionally hear Overwatch reminding CPs that they can get a promotion if they opt for memory replacement. Well, that's the first step to becoming an Overwatch soldier. Now, as far as I can tell, these guys aren't a hive mind. They've just had their minds scrubbed of every emotion, memory, and skill that isn't useful in combat. They're hyper-organized. I mean, just look at some of these maneuvers they use. 2 of them fire while the other one reloads, they flush you out of cover with grenades or a flank route, they advance on you when you're wounded. Shotgunners don't use all of their ammo in one bout unless they have to. Snipers will destroy your cover and use ambient explosives against you. Now, Combine soldiers don't have great accuracy, and Gordon is a bit of a bullet sponge when he's got a decent charge on his suit, even on hard mode. Those 2 things combined can definitely make these guys seem kinda dumb, but this AI is actually pretty damn impressive. There are some pathfinding issues which cause them to get to where they're going a bit slowly, plus you're shooting at each other, which kind of distracts you from the intricacies. But these guys are genuinely super well coordinated. Take a look at how well they capitalize on their advantage here and almost get me killed.
Yeah, fighting those bastards always had me like, oh, god damn it.
Anyways, the reason I'm getting so into this is to emphasize just how non-human these guys are. The way they audibly count down the timer on their grenades. The way they coordinate so cleanly with so little audible speech. The way that they describe killing a man as amputating them from the populace. Amputate, malignant, coagulate, infection, diagnose, dissect, sociocidal. All of this medical language, this is where we get to the most sinister aspect of the Combine. It views all of humanity as a single organism, a single body. It describes dissident citizens as malignant, and when sentencing one, it orders its troops to diagnose, amputate, and coagulate. You might have noticed that I've been referring to the Combine as the singular it over the course of this video, rather than the plural they. Well, this is why. It's why it's called the Combine. It combines everything it touches into one being, a being which is simply called the Combine. As a human under the Combine's rule, you're little more than a white blood cell, and if you act with any more free will than a white blood cell, you're infected. You're committing sociocidal acts, and you need to be amputated. This is why it always hits me so hard when I hear the Overwatch address Freeman as individual. He's one of, if not the only human on Earth who isn't a citizen of the Combine. He's the only one who is, in the Combine's eye, an individual being, like itself. This whole story is, in the Combine's eye, 2 beings going against each other. It's Gordon and it's the Combine. Gordon is this foreign, cancerous cell that somehow worked its way into the Combine's bloodstream and is spreading its malignance throughout the entire body until eventually the whole of Earth is as good as destroyed in the Combine's eyes. Earth. That's where we get to the parasitic nature of the Combine. That's where we get to this absolutely beautiful visual metaphor that's at play throughout the entirety of Half-Life 2. Look at how the Combine has sort of integrated itself into human society and architecture. Every human has some sort of ID chip in their hand. Combine structures have sort of forced their way into human architecture all over the place. Restrictors burrow into the sand, smart walls shake the earth beneath them, preventing an antlion infestation, and of course, the Combine's biggest tumor of all, the Citadel. This gigantic blemish on the surface of the earth, metaphorically draining her resources through these long tendrils that spread across the city. Again, metaphorically speaking, these tendrils might as well be the ones that have drained so much of Earth's oceans. Speaking of, the canals in City 17 are where this visual metaphor is at its best in my eye. Take a look at what this is. These canals symbolize how humans once worked their way into Earth's ecosystem and integrated themselves into it. Only now, the Combine is here. The waters have been polluted and drained. Dead, useless ships are all stranded in the newly drained canal, left to rot. And all that's left is the dried up husk of what was once a healthy body, a healthy planet, a healthy population, and a few Combine tumors dotted around the place, draining what little life this dead, empty husk of a once biologically rich planet has to offer them. That's what's so dark about the Combine. It doesn't just replace Earth's infrastructure with its own, it uses every last bit of it that is useful, and it leaves the rest to die and rot. The Combine is a parasite,
That's not
sucking on the corpse of a
sustainable.
once beautiful planet, which was destroyed as it multiplied and spread itself across the entrails of an ecosystem. On the smallest, most insignificant level, to the scale of the entire planet, the Combine has parasitized every last thing on this planet that could ever be considered alive, and combined it into one. So answer me this. Are you gonna pick up that can?
Lately called me a collaborator, as if such a term were shameful. I ask you, what greater endeavor exists than that of collaboration? In our current unparalleled enterprise, refusal to collaborate is simply a refusal to grow, an insistence on suicide, if you will.
Sure,
Did
buddy.
a lungfish refuse to breathe air? It did not. It crept forth boldly while its brethren remained in the blackest ocean abyss, with lidless eyes forever staring at the dark, ignorant and doomed despite their eternal vigilance. Would we model ourselves on the trilobite? Are all the accomplishments of humanity fated to be nothing more than a layer of broken plastic shards, thinly strewn across a fossil bed, sandwiched between the Burgess Shale and an eon's worth of mud? In order to be true to our nature and our destiny, we must aspire to greater things. We have outgrown our cradle. It is futile to cry for mother's milk when our true sustenance awaits us.
Protection team alert. Evidence of accidental activity in this community. Code. Assembled. Stamp. Contained.
Very good video.
Before I
like that
head
one.
out and get to playing LSD Dream Emulator, I'd just like to go ahead and verbally thank my patrons, especially those donating $10 or more monthly, such as Alex Vanderwood, Almost Dead Again, Anatoly Volnov, Andrew Melnick, Arthur D. Gonzalez Martin, Benny, Big Time Jim, Bobby Blitz, Colin Gajic, Cosmo Borski, Daniel Chrisman, Darius Fazier, David Kaiser, Dr. Mine, Dominic Johan, Duncan Bristow, Fralum, In Bloom, Jack Eisenberg, Jano, John Strange, Cale Graybill, Mellow, Mixer Rules, Money and Muses, Moon, Patio Furniture, Perks 3D, CeeLo, Tanman, Yemen Shi, Young Master Pig, and Zyroobly. I would also like to specify two things, specifically to the patrons. Firstly, after reading some of the messages I've received from you guys, I'd like to specify that you really
Big
don't owe
time,
me
Jim.
anything. Your patronage is of course appreciated, but you don't need to apologize if you can't keep it up or don't have the money to donate in the first place. And secondly, my patron list is getting to be a little bit of a mess. The website doesn't really help me organize this stuff very much, so if you ever catch me missing your name, mispronouncing it, or anything, don't hesitate to send me a message and I'll happily correct it. Lastly, I'd just like to thank you guys for the great amount of support I got on that Grand Theft Auto 5 video. That was my first one I've ever done with a sponsorship, and the reception to that has been overwhelmingly positive. Needless to say, it's made me feel a whole lot more secure after the turbulent months of December and January. So, thanks for everything, guys. I couldn't ask for a better community. Have a good week. Despite what everyone, even myself, has said about this game over the years, I think that Metal Gear Solid 4 is the best thing that could have possibly happened to the series at this point in its life.
Oh, Metal Gear. Still think
Metal
about
Gear
it every
Solid
time.
4 is an incredibly difficult game to talk about for the same reasons that MGS2 is, because its flaws are kind of the whole point. This, on paper, isn't an issue, but in practice it's going to make me look like a fanboy, reaching to find deeper meaning in something that, from the outside, appears to just be a train wreck. The Metal Gear Solid series is my favorite franchise of any
I know that
medium of
feel.
all time. So, while that gives me an inherent bias here, my extensive familiarity with the series means that I might be able to see things from a different angle than somebody who played this game 4 years after the previous, and who haven't played the original Amiga games in 18 years in MGS4's launch, if at all. So, while I may be reaching and completely unaware of it, I'll ask you to bear with me as I dive into this game and see if we can figure out just what the point of this whole thing was. There are 3 things I'd like to know before moving ahead. Naturally, I'm going to be talking about Kojima's intentions a lot during this video, and I just want to preface this by saying that I can't say for certain anything about the man. So if you hear me say Kojima was trying to get across the fact that yada yada yada, just know that I'm speaking from my perspective, not trying to implant my own personality onto Kojima. Everything said here is just how I view Kojima's intent, not the be-all end-all truth of the matter. Subjective truths are what make art art. The second thing I'd like to clarify, and I'll go into more detail on this as we move forward, is that I see MGS4 as an approximation of what would happen to MGS if it went on for 5 or 6 more games. So while it's only the 4th, or technically the 6th game in the series, it's playing the role of a sequel in a series that's been running for much longer. Essentially, it's a prediction of what a Metal Gear game would look like after 30 years of being sequelized. MGS4 is Kojima subjecting Metal Gear Solid to the same accelerated aging that Snake is going through. This is going to be pretty important for how I describe a lot of the intentions I see in this game. And lastly, I actually really like a lot of Call of Duty games, but I will be mentioning them as a contrast to the design of a typical Metal Gear game, as Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare came out only a year before this game, and completely changed the face of the games industry. While I'm on the topic, I also really love this game, MGS4. We've got a little bit more background stuff to handle before we go into the really interesting stuff, so let me preface my list of interesting narrative decisions in this game by saying that I really do think that this is an incredibly cool, interesting, and creative story. At face value, this narrative is a fantastic way to conclude the timeline of the Metal Gear series, and has such a poetic and natural conclusion that, again, at face value, it might be an even better conclusion to the story than MGS3 or MGS2 were. I keep using that phrase, at face value. Well, what about when you go a bit deeper? If you ask me, that's when this whole thing sort of falls apart. Again, the majority of this video is going to be spent justifying that stuff, but we have to talk about the problems to explain their reason for being there. So let's get them out of the way here. The major issue with the narrative of MGS4 is that it completely changes so many of the series' most memorable characters, altering their personalities and retroactively changing what their motivations were in previous games, or even just completely resetting their character arcs so that they have to relearn the lessons they learned in previous games. The most glaring example of this is the situation between Meryl and Johnny Sasaki. This is the most interaction that these two characters had in Metal Gear Solid 1, the only other place we've seen the two interact at all. Johnny says that she has a cute butt, and calls her a witch after she beats him up and leaves him naked in the Alaskan base, giving him a cold. However, in this game, the two end up falling in love and getting married. This would be strange on its own, but not necessarily a betrayal of the original characters, until you consider what Meryl was all about in MGS1. Meryl had one motivation in that game. It was to become a war hero.
I always dreamed of becoming a soldier.
She had little romantic interest in Snake until the end of the game. Instead, she respected him as a soldier. In a way, he was her idol and main role model in becoming a soldier.
Besides, it's a waste of time. When I joined up, they gave me psychotherapy to destroy my interest in men.
What Meryl was a young, small girl holding a giant magnum pistol. She was out of her element and trying to fit into boots that were far too big for her, because she wanted to be a legendary soldier. She was that magnum pistol, in a manner of speaking. Then, back in MGS4, in this scene where Johnny proposes to her in the line of duty, she talks about how her dream, ever since she was a child, was to be a bride with flowers and a cake.
And I want a real wedding, with flowers and a cake.
Oh my god.
It's been my dream since I was a little girl.
Now, again, even this isn't necessarily an issue. Characters change over time. But as we see her in her wedding dress walking down the aisle, still equipped with a holster for that gigantic pistol, we're forced to acknowledge just how much her character has changed from the simplistic yet important role she was originally created to serve. This begs the question, why are Meryl and Johnny in this game at all? This same question can be applied to so many different characters. Meryl's arc was completed at the end of MGS1, just as Raiden's arc had already been completed, and Naomi's and Mei Ling's, Campbell's, Vamp's, Rose's, Zero's, Paramedics, Sigint's, Eva's, Big Boss's, Psycho Mantis's, Ocelot's, Otacon's, and indeed the twin snakes, Liquid and Solid. These are all characters whose stories were wrapped in neat little bows, and they've essentially been transplanted into this fantastically interesting story, ultimately doing nothing but lessening its impact. While you can, of course, argue for any of these characters returning, not one of them survives the game with their original character intact, with the possible exception of Otacon. Whether it's Eva saying that she fell in love with Big Boss,
I loved him, but I can't do it. Not because we loved each other, and not because you saved my life, but because I made a promise to the boss.
Rose being confirmed to exist and to love Raiden, Vamp caring about Raiden whatsoever, Paramedic going from a silly, playful amateur to one of the masterminds behind a global conspiracy, or Mantis forgetting the deathbed revelations he had thanks to Snake, every single one of the returning characters has completely changed from what they originally represented. Again, this forces us to ask why these characters are here in the first place. Take Paramedic for example. If you're a freak about canon, as this series sort of demands of you, then the revelation that Paramedic played a role in creating the Patriots will ultimately cheapen the impact she had as a bit of hopeful comic relief if you replay MGS3. It is, in a way, retroactively making the previous games worse, or at least changing the impact that they have on you. Is the revelation that Rose was just an insert by the Patriots perfectly changed to match Raiden's psych profile nearly as impactful now that we know that 5 years later she would be in love with Raiden and keeping the alterations to her face and personality because she loves him? Of course not. However, I'm not a freak about canon, so I don't really mind this stuff, but it's impossible to ignore the impact that this game has on the story. All these characters have been completely changed, some might even say bastardized, and Kojima supposedly knew this perfectly well. So the real question is, why? Well, to answer this question, we'll first have to revisit my interpretation of the meta-meaning to MGS3's ending, or more specifically, that handshake. Don't worry, I'll be brief about this. Well, the boss wanted Naked Snake to acknowledge that, as a soldier, he was nothing more than a tool of the times. He would be fighting whatever battle his country needed him to, regardless of where he stood on the efficacy of the issue. In a meta sense, this is referring to the fact that no matter what time and place a Metal Gear game takes place in, it's going to revolve around a character named Snake going into some place to assassinate somebody who is closely linked to him, either genetically as in Big Boss and Liquid, or mimetically as in Solidus and the Boss. This is why Big Boss went on to create the mercenary nation, Militaire Sans Frontières, and eventually Outer Heaven. This is Big Boss shedding his loyalty to his nation, and instead giving his loyalty to the times. Anywhere that fighting needs to be done, he'll do it. This is why he hesitates to shake the hand of the DARPA chief in MGS3. He now understands that his loyalty isn't to the country, but to the times. That's all well and good, but what does it mean from a meta perspective? Well, it means that characters named Snake are only ever going to exist if the god of the Metal Gear universe, Hideo Kojima, has contrived a mission for them. Regardless of the time period the game takes place in, characters named Snake are doomed to always fight and always be on this sort of mission. You can't make a Metal Gear game that doesn't involve fighting, it just doesn't work that way. So this revelation in Naked Snake was Kojima's way of acknowledging that Metal Gear plotlines are always going to be the same. A character named Snake who's forced to kill somebody who he's related to in one way or the other. There was never any real reason to keep making Metal Gear games after Metal Gear Solid 2 came out, because we already knew what happens in them. Sure, there are a lot of twists and turns that catch us off guard, but the broad strokes of the stories are inevitably going to be the same. No matter what the time and place, the scene of the game, MG stories will always be the same thing, with a new coat of paint. Philosophers instead of Patriots, Russians instead of Genome Soldiers, Naked Snake instead of Solid Snake. So to tie this all together, Hideo Kojima was asking us to just be okay with all the small questions that were left behind, never intended to be answered. He was asking us to put the series to bed by showing us the patterns. Again, not unlike what Bioshock Infinite was getting at with its ending. That is, at least how I see it. Well, as we all know by the fact that Hideo Kojima Metal Gear games kept being made for 11 years after MGS3 came out, that message wasn't received by the core fans or the general audience. In short, they all wanted to know who the Patriots were, regardless of whether Kojima wanted us to know or not. Well, with that out of the way, we can finally get to MGS4. If MGS3 was a subtle acknowledgement that things were going to get repetitive if you kept the series going, then MGS4 is a violent retort, saying, if you don't want to listen to my warning, I'll tear down this entire story. You want these characters' stories to keep going so much? Well here, Meryl and Johnny are going to get married, and Paramedic is one of the Patriots. Happy now? At least, that's how I always looked at it until my most recent playthrough, and I think that that's how a lot of us Kojima sympathizers look at the game. If you watched my video on the Stereophedelics, it's similar to the change in tone between their second album and their third. Well, now, after my second playthrough of MGS4, I think that that violent retort is only half the statement that this game is making. Might as well mention the literal stance that this game takes about the military-industrial complex, vertical integration, consolidation, the plutocracy, and the merging of the social consciousness. I'm aware that all of that stuff is a part of the game, but then so is everybody, so I pretty much won't be mentioning it from here on. No, instead, I want to focus on the meta statement about the Metal Gear Solid series as it exists in our reality, a series of games. So with that, the game isn't just a way to forcibly end the series. The other half of the meta statement is a warning about how these things happen, and an acknowledgement of their inevitability in any series that runs long enough. As an example of this inevitability, let's briefly look at Fargo. It's a movie that I really like, and was eventually rebooted into a show that I absolutely love. I won't spoil anything, but there's a certain event at the end of the movie involving a windshield scraper that beautifully ties together the themes of greed and futility that the movie was working with. Then that event turns out to be a major part of the TV show's plot years later once it was rebooted. Now, that event's role in the TV show is handled with a lot of respect for the source material, but isn't the fact that this was buried here, never to be found, cheapened by the fact that it eventually was found by Now, while this is a small detail and something that some, possibly even myself, would say just elevates the themes of the original film, it's still an example of the original intent being changed. Regardless of where you stand, this wasn't intended to be part of a second story. That's not what it was created for, yet here it is continuing its life after it was supposed to be done with. Now, for a more overtly negative example, let's look at Star Trek. The world of Star Trek was created as a vehicle for cowboy adventures on the final frontier, with constant moral dilemmas and nothing but shades of grey. When the show was rebooted with Star Trek The Next Generation, it was mostly an extension of those ideas, and is most people's favorite iteration of the concept. It was a little different from the original vision of Star Trek, but it was still good for all the same reasons Star Trek was.
Oh yeah.
Then, with Star Trek Deep Space Nine, they examined the show's philosophy under much harsher circumstances, changing the themes of the show a bit more since the original series. And since then, with the countless iterations and reboots of the show, it's slowly been morphed into something completely unrecognizable from the original vision, and it's become something that most people would say is dramatically worse, and that everybody would say is dramatically different. Or, hey, for a more culturally relevant example, just look at how much Luke Skywalker's character changed between the original trilogy and the third trilogy. This is exactly what's been happening with Metal Gear ever since the second game in the series, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, and it's exactly what happens to every series. In Metal Gear Solid 1, they retroactively changed the older games by having Snake remark that Big Boss told him he was his father, when that in fact didn't happen in the original games. While this retroactively adds emotion to a scene that was lacking in it, it still altered the original vision, much like how most people would say that TNG was even better than the original Star Trek. However, by the time of Metal Gear Solid 2, my favorite game in the series, the changes started to be a little bit more damaging. Solid Snake and Otacon had already completed their arcs, but here they are developing as characters a little bit more, when really they didn't need to. There's also information saying that Meryl and Snake's relationship didn't work out.
Besides, I've had enough of tomboys.
And that Liquid and Ocelot went on to become one person after Liquid was killed in MGS1, and that Johnny Sasaki survived.
What's your name?
Don't have one!
Huh?
Okay, fine. It's Johnny! Oh, I'm not gonna make it.
Again, more changes to the original story, but ones that aren't too offensive to the source material. Regardless of the quality of the changes, though, these characters are now serving different roles than they were originally intended to, and that was a subtle sign of things to come. By the time of MGS3, more substantial changes start to occur. While I personally love what was done with Big Boss's character in that game, I have at least one friend who much prefers the more simple character that Big Boss was in the original Metal Gear games on the Amiga, and doesn't like how this badass character had a tragic backstory forced upon him, undermining the stature of his personality and station. Regardless of where you stand on whether these were positive changes or not, this was the most egregious example of retconning in all of Metal Gear Solid,
Yeah?
at least up until 4. And with the previous games out of the way, we can start to talk about that game.
It should be okay to just
I've already
remove...
covered how some of these changes in MGS4 seem to be an attempt to forcibly end the series by giving us awful, sarcastic answers to questions that were never meant to be answered, such as who are the Patriots and what happens with Meryl and Johnny. Well, again, I think that that's only half of MGS4's battle. I think that the main purpose that these retcons serve is as a warning of how these things come to pass, how series like Star Trek are slowly bastardized after years and years of iterations. Well, based on what I've said, what's one of the fastest ways to ruin a series? Retconning. This is what Metal Gear Solid 4 is all about.
Say too much pandering to
Kojima
the
could have
fans.
gone the normal route with this series, slowly creating new games for years and years until eventually the
also
series
works.
was completely changed from what it originally was. Instead, Kojima essentially put the series under accelerated aging, exactly as with Solid and Liquid, to showcase what this series would eventually lead to. A bunch of old, tired characters playing out the same story over and over again, and the things we loved about those characters becoming lost in a vast ocean of lore, retcons, and transplanted character arcs. I mean, our character is quite literally named Old Snake. Kojima gave us a vision of the future of the series. We could end up living in a world where the military-industrial complex has leaked into every facet of civilian life, and we could end up in an inevitable future where the tired characters of this series have had their original personalities sandblasted off of them, and have become completely unrecognizable.
What is this
Kojima
clip?
puts us into that future, with the hope of showing us that it's one that we don't want to live in. While this message could have been delivered angrily, it seems like it's more passive-aggressive than anything else, and even a little sad. Kojima didn't want to see his creations die, but he knew that it would happen eventually. From the first time that Metal Gear was sequelized, it was on life support, and I see MGS4 as an attempt at a mercy killing. While he had always wanted to move on past MGS, killing his baby was the only way he could do it. No matter how exciting Death Stranding was, he had to move past an incredibly important area of his life to get there. And I don't care who you are, that's a sad feeling. This sorrow is expressed in the theme song of the game, titled Old Snake.
Aww.
And it's also expressed in the titular character, Old Snake. The first Old Snake moment we see is naturally in the opening cutscene, where Solid Snake is standing in a courtyard looking at Big Boss's grave, when Otacon comes in and starts talking about trying different doctors to cure Snake's disease, as if Solid really was the old man that he resembles in this game. However, a much more interesting scene comes up shortly after, and it's one that really emphasizes just how much has changed in the leap of time forward that Snake's accelerated aging represents. When Old Snake first meets Drebin, he gets hooked up with a new M4, but Snake is unable to fire it. Drebin explains that this is because Snake has outdated nanomachines, and he's incompatible with modern weapons.
Yeah, well, you know, I get a lot of noobs around here.
This makes Snake lose a bit of morale. After all, this is more or less clear evidence that this once legendary soldier is now just a relic of the past, and has no place in the modern age of warfare. As Snake says multiple times, war has changed. And even in the peak in the future that this game is, Metal Gear still refused to change, at least as far as the soul of its gameplay goes. Even though we're controlling characters that have relatively clunky controls designed to be perfect for the series' unique breed of stealth, the modern age of war, and more abstractly the modern age of war games, demands that we use those stealth controls in open combat much more than they were originally intended. That's simply what gamers at the time wanted. You gotta remember, this game came out in 2008, only a year after Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, when the entire world was obsessed with these military action games. COD 4 sold 10 million units in its first year, even beating out Halo 3. Needless to say, the realistic military-themed cover-based shooter was all the rage when MGS4 was being developed, hence Snake says war has changed. If there's one era in gaming where slow-paced stealth puzzles didn't fit in, it was this one. So again, we're forced to do our best to fit this relic of the past, Metal Gear Solid, and its controls into the modern era, fighting in Afghanistan, doing crazy vehicle sections with mounted guns and shootouts in giant buildings, where stealth is hardly even an option. I mean, this in-game podcast you can listen to on the iPod even reminds you that you should try and play it like a stealth game.
Progress check.
I hope everyone finds their way to play it, because there's various ways. My recommendation is try just sneak everything through. It's gonna be really fun.
Yeah, definitely. Play it as a sneaking game.
Yeah.
Not as a straight-up action game. You're gonna enjoy it.
Yeah, it is.
Speedruns of the previous game require mastering so many different systems and not even interacting with most guards, which is, unlike most speedruns, actually super indicative of how these games were intended to be played. That's what Snake is all about, not running around shooting people, but again, this is where gaming was at the time, and Snake has to use the syringe to suppress his nanomachines in order to fire modern weapons and fit in on this changed battlefield. With the suppression of the original stealth-centric controls, suppressed nanomachines, it's all too easy to run and gun your way through this game on most difficulties. Just look at speedruns of this game. They consist 90% of just running in and trank headshotting people, completely unlike those wild, inventive speedruns of the previous games. This idea of trying to stay true to Metal Gear in a world of action games is captured in many of the scenarios too. These first two acts, for instance, are mostly spent trying to sneak Snake through an active battlefield. It's like you just plopped Snake into a mission from Call of Duty 4, and he's just sneaking around trying to do Metal Gear things while these enemies won't even give him the light of day. I mean, you can barely even distract any of them. They're too busy playing Call of Duty. War has changed. So, to summarize what themes emerged from this first scene with Drebin, Snake didn't fit in with modern soldiers, modern games, because he still had nanomachines from the previous era of gaming. And so Drebin gives him a shot to suppress those nanomachines, to suppress the instincts that the rest of the series has taught us to hone. This makes Snake compatible with modern warfare, double entendre intended. While this isn't literally a retcon, it serves the same purpose as the previous retcons. It's a change in identity. Think of the control scheme and the tone and pacing of classic Metal Gear gameplay as a character, and suddenly, much like Vamp, Eva, Naomi, and Mei Ling, that character has been retconned. Well, what if it's true that MGS4 becoming more like an action game was the only way it could survive? We're left at a catch-22 then. You could annoy the core fans by changing your identity, or you could ignore the climate your game is being released in by sticking to your guns, and going into the future of gaming kicking and screaming, ultimately just drawing out the inevitable death by loss of identity. Metal Gear had to change eventually, and again, like Snake's accelerated aging, Kojima took the more merciful option of making a game that seems like it was made 6 Metal Gear games later than it was, showing us where we would end up if we kept asking for Metal Gear games and then pulling the plug. Of course, Metal Gear did survive MGS4, but we're talking about intentions here, and like most games in the series, Metal Gear Solid 4 was meant to be the last of it. So anyway, these nanomachines come up later at several other points in this game, and Snake just has to keep suppressing them to stay alive and relevant. Like at this point here, there's a lot of plot-heavy explanation that I'm not going to get into here, but Liquid Ocelot is doing his first trial of a new scheme he's cooking up, and what it does is turn off every soldier's nanomachines, which were suppressing their emotions. As a result, every soldier that the test was being performed on is hit with years and years worth of PTSD in a matter of seconds.
Oh my god.
Some of them just have heart attacks and die, others go into a psychotic rage, others just collapse from the trauma, and that's what happens to Snake. Suppressing his outdated nanomachines is what keeps Snake relevant and able to fight, but the suppression of nanomachines, suppressing the soul of your game, old or new, also leads to death and a complete change in identity and personality. So while these PMC soldiers have no reason to want their nanomachines suppressed, and would only feel the negative effects of it, Snake, as a soldier from the old generation, does need his nanos suppressed to some degree, otherwise he literally can't fight. Like I said, it's a catch-22, both for Snake and the game itself. Anyways, for the purposes of keeping this essay focused on Snake, the best analog we have for the game itself, we'll just say that the plot keeps chugging along until we eventually meet Naomi again. She explains the accelerated aging to us, but what's even worse than that is what she explains next. Foxdie, the virus that Solid was infected with and was intended to attack Liquid Snake's genetic code in MGS1, is slowly mutating in Snake's body, and in the span of 6 months it will have mutated to the point that it will just attack random people's genetic code, not just Liquid's, meaning that Snake would become the greatest biological weapon ever conceived. This can only mean one thing, and Naomi clarifies it for us. No longer than 6 months from now, Snake is going to have to kill himself. We're at the end of the line here. In terms of yet another metaphor, the Metal Gear series is becoming vague and slowly beginning to trade in its niche appeal for a wider target audience, the Call of Duty fans. While I don't think anyone would dispute that it's practically the polar opposite of a war shooter in terms of story and gameplay, this is the game where a lot of the aesthetic similarities started appearing, with Yoji Shinkawa's militaristic architecture being exchanged for much less unique architecture, bombed out dusty buildings in the Middle East, as if games at the time didn't have enough of those. Metal Gear and Foxdie were originally meant to appeal to just one type of person, but after the 30 years of sequelizing that this game represents, both Foxdie and the series are becoming vague and imprecise with their target audience and victims respectively.
If it were up to me, you'd be quarantined already.
Naomi also hands us a syringe, the same kind that Drebin used on us. Whenever our nanomachines are going haywire from being disconnected from SOP, we can use this syringe to suppress our nanos and keep fighting. In-game, this syringe simply refills our psych meter, which, to bring the metaphor to a head, means that this psych meter can be seen as a how much have we fooled ourselves into thinking that we're still a Metal Gear game meter. If it's high because we haven't been exposed to combat much, then the nanomachines of our old ways are sufficiently suppressed, and we're able to convince ourselves that this is still Metal Gear. However, when it gets low, it indicates that we've been actively fighting, getting detected, being shot at, Call of Duty stuff. Naturally, this means that it's become near impossible to ignore that this game doesn't carry the soul of classic Metal Gear Solid, as we shoot, dodge, and run around like, well, a Call of Duty character. Our nanomachines are practically screaming at us that this isn't what Snake was designed to be doing, and that we don't fit in here, so we'll have to take that syringe and suppress those nanomachines some more. This brings to mind another aspect of the syringe mechanic. Over time, as we keep using it, either in cutscene or in gameplay, it becomes less and less effective at suppressing our nanos, and we end up barely benefiting from it at all as we start to wrap up the final fight with Liquid Ocelot. But we'll get there soon, we still have a couple other things to talk about in the meantime. Before getting back to Snake, let's briefly check in with what's going on with some of our other characters by this point in the story, and more specifically, let's look at how they're all behaving in ways that run totally counter to their original roles in their respective games. Firstly, we have Vamp, who's changed in a number of ways. Vamp's original motivations seemed a bit fuzzy in MGS2. He was the most loyal to Dead Cell, the special forces group hired by the Patriots for the S3 plan. He was cocky and full of himself, but in a restrained way, and he had a lust for blood and death. In MGS2, he carves a tally into his chest for every victim he takes, but in MGS4, he wears their dog tags instead. In MGS2, he has no respect for Raiden whatsoever, taunting him constantly between the placement of the landmines, the way he explains that he can read Raiden's body language like a book, and the way that he taunts Raiden by killing EE when Raiden was looking at him through the scope of his sniper. He thinks that Raiden is just some loser kid, who he has no reason to respect or fear. In MGS4, however, he seems to have complete respect for and excitement to fight Raiden, who admittedly has become much more powerful since he took on those Metal Gear raids in MGS2. Regardless of that, it's just plain out of character for Vamp to not be acting like he's completely above it all. We also see Vamp using a cell phone, which is just wrong. Raiden is actually somewhat consistent with where he was heading in life by the end of MGS2. However, Raiden's purpose as a character was to be the underdog living in Snake's shadow, and eventually become more powerful than Snake. He fulfilled that, and he learned that we all have the ability to offer an equally valid perspective on reality. He learned that message, but by the time we meet him in MGS4, he seems to have unlearned it. He's being controlled by his genes again rather than letting himself be liberated by his memes. This is evidenced by the fact that he's willing to let himself die over and over again, all because his wife left him and he doesn't know about his son. If Raiden had truly taken Snake's lessons at the end of MGS2, he wouldn't care if he had a biological son or not, and that revelation wouldn't be enough to drag him from the abyss. Naomi is once again being a double agent for herself, coming in to help various people in the game, Liquid and Solid, but actually having an ulterior motive in all of this, exactly as she did in MGS1. Only again, by the end of MGS1, she supposedly had learned the error of her ways. Yet here she is in the sequel exhibiting the exact same behavior and learning the exact same lesson again, just in time for her death. Sure, her motives were more righteous this time around, but she's still going behind people's backs and going through the same process of betrayals a second time. This time she even seems to fall in love with Otacon, whereas she was a completely independent woman in the original game, only flirting with Snake to lower his guard. Campbell, again, is making the same mistakes that he supposedly learned his lesson about in MGS1. He learned that all of these secrets he's keeping from Snake only serve to make Snake completely distrust him and put him at risk of losing their friendship, and again he's doing the exact same thing with Rose. Like Naomi, he's got the best intentions, but he's still making Snake think he's just some womanizer, dating a girl who's young enough to be his daughter. With these examples, I think you can start to see how this game serves to undermine the plots of the previous games, if you're worried about canon that much. All of these characters learn the lessons by the end of their respective games, but if you've played MGS4, all of those arcs are completely undermined by the simple fact that they seem to completely forget these lessons just 2 or 3 games later. The characters, through the metaphorical decades of sequelizing, have become nothing but cheap ways of calling back to the classic games of the golden era of Metal Gear. I mean, for God's sake, they even throw in Dr. Madnar in there for the sake of a pointless callback. Again, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Some people will inevitably dislike it if these characters, who already had their stories told, aren't in the game, and other people will inevitably dislike it if you put them in the game and mess with their original role to the story and world. This is the trouble with over-sequelizing, and that trouble is exactly what this game is trying to get across with its metaphorical leap forward to where the series might be after another 10 years of sequels. So back to Snake, we're now at Act 3, where things start to really get fun from a gameplay perspective, and the intention behind all these strange decisions starts to make a bit more sense. This is also the section of the game that has what is probably the strangest plot development in the entire series, but we'll get to that shortly. Act 3 takes place in Eastern Europe, where Snake is trying to meet up with a resistance leader who is meant to have Big Boss's corpse. This section is pure Metal Gear Solid, whereas the previous 2 acts revolved around an active war zone, meaning we could hardly interact with the enemies at all, as they were much too busy fighting a shooting war. In this section, the conflict is purely based on subterfuge, Snake's specialty. We're tasked with tailing resistance members to the other side of the town square, where the headquarters are located. To do this, we have to take down any PMC guards that might be blocking the way, as the resistance isn't all that sneaky. In terms of gameplay, this section is a complete blast from the past. We're sneaking around guards, dodging their sightline by mere inches, placing down playboys to distract them, knocking on walls, using our CQC grabs, and throwing empty mags to get their attention. We finally get to put our years of experience with this series to use, whereas most of the previous acts simply revolved around crawling and trank headshotting. Fittingly, seeing as this chapter is the first one that lets us really get in deep with Metal Gear's unique breed of stealth action, this section is about as old-timey as it could possibly be. We're in a trench coat, walking incognito through rainy streets. You can practically smell the smoke of filterless cigarettes in the air. It looks and feels like an old-timey detective movie, especially since we have to literally tail those resistance members. They'll get spooked if they see us. As George from Super Bunny Hop put it, this is your granddad's idea of what a stealth game looks like. In tandem with the trench coat, we're also most likely to be wearing the Octo camo that makes us look like Solid Snake back when he was young, before he was just Old Snake. The one time we get to feel and play like the Solid Snake we know and love, we're in an environment wearing a costume that makes it feel like we're in the 1930s. Well, eventually Snake gets into the Resistance's HQ, and invigorated by the return to his roots over this act, does some classic CQC, taking down the guards around him in a way not unlike how Big Boss took on the Ocelot unit the first time. This is when we first meet Eva, who's now going by the name Big Mama. And when Kojima, once and for all, put this series in a nosedive that it could never recover from. All intentionally, of course, or so I believe. After the ending of MGS2, the whole community was clamoring to figure out who the Patriots were, as if we were meant to know that. Revealing who the Patriots are would be like revealing who G-Man is in Half-Life. The answer can never be as satisfying as the mystery. Well, Kojima's sarcastic answer to the Patriots mystery would be like if it were revealed that Barney Calhoun were the G-Man all along. Eva tells us who the Patriots were. It was all of Snake's alleged allies from Metal Gear Solid 3. Eva, the backstabbing triple agent, Sigint, the guy who really knew his military tech and would go on to be the DARPA chief, Ocelot, the cocky young kid who risked and ended so many lives just for a chance to play a prank on Big Boss, Zero, the Joker who likes James Bond movies, Paramedic, the horribly unprofessional field medicine expert who was more concerned with yanking Snake's chain than actually helping him, and worst of all, Big Boss himself, the man who realized that he can never have any true control in this story or his destiny. This group of clowns and misfits went on to create this world's equivalent to the Illuminati. Half of these characters were mainly being used for comic relief, while the other half were betraying Snake one after the other. Yet they all team up in the end, and all those people building their theories on who the Patriots were just left with their jaws on the floor in disbelief, confusion, and maybe even a feeling of betrayal on the part of the story. Then, Eva talks about how much she loved Big Boss, a man who didn't show a shred of emotion towards her until the final 30 minutes of MGS3, and who she was tasked with pretending to fall in love with so that she could get the Philosopher's Legacy from him once she got his guard down. The only bit of genuine affection she ever showed for him that didn't have any ulterior motive was simply that she let Big Boss live when she was ordered to kill him. Another betrayal to her role in the original story she was written for. Well, after this, let's say shocking development, Big Boss's body, which is actually Solidus's body, is destroyed by Liquid, who has now taken over the Guns of the Patriots system, GOPS, meaning he's able to disable any military equipment he chooses to. Weapons, vehicles, even the soldiers' nanomachines are all under his control. However, he still doesn't have complete control over the Sons of the Patriots, the AI cluster that's running this whole show. Only the military side of things. With this power, he kills Eva, and Rapatrol 01 and Snake barely survive. Once we get back on the Nomad, the plane that all our briefings have taken place on thus far, it's revealed that Liquid has created the first ever total ceasefire in human history. This sounds like a great thing, but all our characters are acting like it's horrible.
Guns are falling silent across the Earth. It's the first total ceasefire in human history.
How's the White House responding? The public.
When Campbell says war economy related stocks are going into a freefall, it's treated like this is something we need to stop as soon as possible.
The war economy is ground to a complete halt. It's tough to play down a crisis of these proportions. War economy related stocks are already going into a freefall.
Well, why is that? As the game says multiple times, this world's economy revolves around the military-industrial complex, or as the game calls it, the war economy. If all war totally stopped, they would be in an economic dark ages worldwide. However, there's more to this than that. As I said in my Metal Gear Solid 3 ending analysis, Big Boss learned when he killed the boss that characters named Snake will never be anything but player characters in war games, and that for this reason there can never be world peace in the world of Metal Gear, because if there was, there wouldn't be any more Metal Gear games. Well, Liquid, facing the same accelerated aging as Solid, also realized that the two of them, and by extension the world of Metal Gear, is a relic of the past and needs to die. Liquid wants to destroy Big Boss's dream of stability, peace, through war. So he's attempting to control the entire AI system that was built to carry out and perpetuate that vision. Big Boss's dream is the reason anything in this timeline past Solid 3 was even possible, and Liquid wants to control it. That AI system, the Patriots, essentially is Metal Gear, the series. In a meta sense, Liquid is essentially a character that would rather control the future of the series, while Solid is trying to just end the series here and now before it can get into the enemy's hands. In a way, Liquid could represent Konami, trying to keep the series going forever, even after Kojima eventually leaves, and Solid would then represent Kojima, realizing that the only way he can let Metal Gear keep its creative integrity is to pull the plug, and end the series however he can. Again, like most games in the series, Metal Gear Solid 4 was intended to be the last entry. This was well before any plans for Peace Walker or MGS-V, which killed it for good with its insane budget and the admirably stubborn ways of its director. So anyways, we've got to stop Liquid. Snake and Kojima's time with the series is lapsing by the second, and if we don't hurry, Liquid will gain control of the series before Snake and Kojima are able to kill it. Maybe Kojima didn't even want to leave Konami by this point. After all, they funded his dreams, and they'd been pretty good to him by this point as far as I know. However, this game is, again, a look at the potential future of the series, and Kojima must have known that eventually Metal Gear would have to die, and he would have to leave Konami before he could work on any other IP. So, let's get a brief catch-up with the story so far to explain what Solid's motivation is for this fourth act. Liquid has gained control of the GW AI, reassembled after EE's virus destroyed it in MGS2. He's implanted GW into the AI that controls the entire cluster, the Patriots, JD. and he's now trying to launch a nuke at JD so that the next AI in the chain, GW, will be activated as a sort of failsafe, giving Liquid full control over the entire AI cluster, control over the Patriots. Well, Liquid has disabled all weapons that are connected to GOPS, so how do you fire a warhead without a propulsion system? MGS 1 and 3 fans already know the answer, a railgun. And where did we last see one of those? Metal Gear Rex, back on Shadow Moses Island. Well, this section starts off with a near one-to-one recreation of the Shadow Moses exterior, the most iconic map from MGS1, down to the PS3 actually changing the resolution it's running at, messing with your TV for a sec. It's practically a perfect recreation, and as fun as some of the sections of this game are, it's one of the most fun sections of the whole game for me. But anyways, with our nostalgia neurons freshly fired, we start our venture into the real thing, and these two scenes combined really make you remark on just how old the Metal Gear series is. I mean, when we come across the iconic security camera cutscene, the camera just falls off this time around, having succumbed to its age. As we stroll through Shadow Moses for a second time, we get all sorts of other notes to the same effect. Otacon asks Snake to remember what a code was, and most of us probably forgot what it was our first time around. A clever meta moment where our forgetfulness as gamers is paralleled with Snake's forgetfulness as an old man. We get a codec call from Otacon telling us that we need to swap discs, only for him to remember that this is a PS3 this time around, and that its Blu-ray discs are double-sided and can store much more than classic CDs. And we even get a much more modern feeling sniper fight against Crying Wolf, in the exact same arena that we fought Sniper Wolf in back in the glory days. It's plain to see that the old ways have seen plenty of aging. Much like Snake, these hallways are decrepit, obsolete, and fully succumb to the elements. As we move on, we get a nice little fight against Vamp, where the only way to stop him from reviving is to grab him with CQC, and inject him with that same nanomachine suppressing syringe that Naomi gave us. With this, he's no longer immortal, and he chooses to have one last fight with Raiden while we hold off a swarm of suicide-bombing Gecko. Before this, however, Naomi has her death scene, in which she showcases the first half of the same revelation she's had a second time after the first game, but we've already been over that. We even get another scene of Otacon crying over a deceased love of his, and he's forced to have yet another revelation. This is the third time he's had this scene. First over Sniper Wolf, then over EE, his stepsister that he always had debatable feelings for, and now over Naomi. After Raiden defeats Vamp once and for all, we get a fun little escape sequence in which we pilot Metal Gear Rex out of the hangar, and an absolutely sweet, yet totally non-Metal Gear boss fight against Liquid, who's piloting a Metal Gear Ray. Two Metal Gears fighting is again sweet, but it just goes to show that these old, obsolete characters are a pretty awkward match for the high-energy combat that the mid to late 2000s started to repopularize. Anyways, we defeat Liquid, then Liquid defeats us, Raiden sacrifices a couple limbs to save us, don't worry, they can be replaced, and we get an emergency extraction from Mei Ling, the naive data analyst turned naval commander aboard the USS Missouri. So now Liquid has his railgun, and Arsenal Gear is getting primed to fire a nuke at the JD satellite, giving Liquid full control over the AI cluster that is the Patriots. Thankfully, the Missouri was decommissioned before the GOP system was implemented, meaning it wasn't shut down with the rest of the world's weapons. So we use some crazy slingshot thing to board the GW AI, and with that, Snake has to sneak through to the central server room for GW. The only issue is he has to pass through the microwave hallway. I'll give brief lip service to the Screaming Mantis fight, in which both Meryl and a previous consciousness of Psycho Mantis repeat things that they'd already grown past as characters. However, let's get to this microwave
that thing
hallway.
is so weird.
As admittedly silly as it is, with Snake's tight rubber pants right there center frame, it's kind of the emotional core of the whole game. Raiden is about to succumb to his old ways, being a loser. Meryl and Johnny are about to succumb to their old ways, being complete amateurs, and Mei Ling is about to succumb to her old ways, being totally out of her element, but nervously giving hopeful words. If Liquid succeeds in firing this nuke, Metal Gear will, metaphorically speaking, go to Konami's hands, and will continue to play and replay these old character arcs for as long as people can go without having utter disdain for the characters. But if we can just keep mashing that triangle button, we can pull the plug on Metal Gear before it ever becomes so horribly distorted by that corporate greed. The only way we can preserve the sanctity of those classic MGS games is to end it now, before 10 more years of retconning, before the constant adding of question marks to already completed stories ruins our perception of those utterly magical first 3 games. Snake is moments away from death, just as in this vision of the future, Kojima is moments away from leaving Konami, and if Kojima and Snake fail in their final mission, the Patriots and the Metal Gear series will forever be controlled by Liquid and Konami, respectively. Konami are the Patriots, or at least what the Patriots would be if controlled by Liquid. Sure, we suffered some heavy losses along the way with non-Kojima directed Metal Gear games like Acid, Portable Ops, and Ghost Babel, but if we can just keep on mashing triangle a little bit longer, we can save this series from a terrible death and give it the death it deserves. And ultimately, we succeed. The Patriots, and by extension the Metal Gear series, are finally dead. Again, this would turn out to be a false victory, but in the context of this game and this game alone, it's a victory nonetheless. We finally finished it, and Metal Gear Solid can go to sleep forever. We won't have to live in the future that this game portrays, the future where Metal Gear kept on being sequelized until things like this were being done unironically. We aren't done yet. With Liquid's plans foiled, we still have time for one last fight for old time's sake, one last chance to reminisce over how we got here, how we got to a Metal Gear game that wanted to destroy the series, and why it was inevitable. We ride this platform up and we have one last fight in order to finally complete our mission, and leave us with a flood of memories of previous games, to remind us why this future we've been shown for Metal Gear is one that's worth fighting against. This is a battle through the ages. Snake, Liquid, and Ocelot are old and tired, but until the end of this fight, we're able to forget all of this. We get the classic HUD and the classic music from the previous 3 Metal Gear games as Liquid and Snake throw themselves at each other, seemingly endlessly. These are great memories, but they also serve as a firm and sad reminder of how we got here. None of those previous games were originally meant to be created, and with each one, the changes to characters got more and more cumbersome. I mean, in MGS2 alone, we saw Ocelot's character sacrificed in order to make room to bring Liquid back from the dead, just so that we could have more Metal Gear Solid. The retcons have always been happening, and MGS4 is just a portrayal of where that road will inevitably lead. However, with that music and classic HUDs, it's impossible to not get swept up in the moment. Sure, these characters look old and rusty, but they're still the characters we love, and they're still fantastic fighters, and if we could just return to the glory days, when they and the series were younger, we could see that perfectly. But as we get to the penultimate stage of the fight, when the MGS4 theme kicks in, and we see its credit card brutally titling the song Old Snake, it's impossible to ignore the truth anymore. These characters have been through more story than any character can survive intact, especially in a series that has as many obligations to meta-narratives as this one does. There's just no getting around it. If we want to preserve those memories that the rest of this fight just reminded us of, we need to kill Liquid and put the series to rest. Well, we do eventually. Liquid, the Patriots, the Metal Gear series, they're all put down, spared an unfitting and overly drawn-out death. We rush them to the grave just as soon as they belonged in it, and it's the best thing that possibly could have happened to the series at this point. We have a wedding scene, showcasing more of what we lost along the way, that being Meryl and Johnny's characters, but still a perfect scene to symbolize moving on to another stage of life. A stage that isn't so revolved around combat, violence, and being a video game. Snake is missing from this scene, however. He has to finish his mission. He has to kill himself, thus ending the Snake bloodline once and for all. We cut to Snake in a graveyard, looking over Big Boss's grave, where this all started from, and we think we hear him kill himself until the post-credits scene, in which Big Boss returns, revealed to have never been killed. It was Solidus's body that was burned by Liquid back in Europe. Big Boss has always been the true soul of Metal Gear Solid. MGS1 was all about Liquid trying and failing to live up to the image of Big Boss. MGS2 was all about Raiden trying to live up to Snake, after Snake learned that he can't spend his life trying to live up to Big Boss as Liquid did. And MGS3 is all about how Big Boss set the events of the games in motion.
I can't take the name of
Big
Liquid
Boss is
seriously.
Metal Gear, just as much as the Patriots are Metal Gear. If Big Boss says that killing Metal Gear was the right thing to do, then it's as close to a direct message from Kojima as we're possibly going to get.
Boss, you only need one Snake. No. The world would be better off without snakes.
I'm not going to get too into detail on Big Boss's final speech in the post-credit scene, simply because I'm not a computer science major, and this whole bring zero back to nothing thing is a metaphor regarding how computers work, and more specifically binary. However, you don't need a college degree to understand what Big Boss is trying to get across. He's essentially confirming everything that I've said so far. As long as there is a 0, in this case the character named 0, there will eventually be a 1, then a 10, then 100, then 1,000. While in terms of mathematics that isn't true, I'm going to take it on faith that in terms of binary computer language it is true. After all, a 0 would amount to no computer calculations if it wasn't preceded by a 1. Again, I'm not a computer science major, but again, I don't need to be. What this game did by changing all of these characters so drastically is reduce them to 0. There's practically 0 of the original Vamp in this game's iteration of him, and practically 0 Naomi, Mei Ling, Raiden, Rose Campbell, Dr. Madnar, 0, or any of the other characters. The fruits of Snake and Kojima's labor over the game is that they've all been reduced to 0. However, if this sequence is allowed to continue, in terms of this computer metaphor, those zeros will inevitably cascade into thousands, and we'll be living in that future where Metal Gear is doing things like this and this unironically. So, in terms of that metaphor, Zero does have some value as the seed from which so much can cascade from. So, we'll have to bring Zero back to nothing. Kill Zero, kill Big Boss, and let Snake die in peace. This speech is Kojima, Big Boss, and Metal Gear as a whole, begging Konami to not resurrect the corpse of the series that this game finally pulled the plug on, ending its inevitable suffering, and fading into obscurity. Please, Konami, don't let that Zero cascade. Let Zero go back to nothing, and let Metal Gear die with some dignity. Metal Gear is dead. There simply can't be any more Metal Gear games, and the reception of Metal Gear Survive is all the proof you need of that. Metal Gear is Hideo Kojima as much as Stanley Kubrick is Dr. Strangelove. While you may pump out games called Metal Gear such and such for God knows how long, you'll never make another Metal Gear game.
Hello?
Hideo Kojima and Solid Snake made sure of that when they ripped the series out of yours and Liquid's hands. And that is why I think that Metal Gear Solid 4 is the best thing that possibly could have happened to the series.
Brutal. A call from a friend who I'm waiting for. Give this a little bit of a strap. I don't know what's like too much bulge. I don't look at a lot of bulges.
Over these last couple of days, I decided to rebuild my office in Steam VR Home so that I could more easily walk around my room without worrying about bumping into things. And for the first time, I had a genuine understanding of what this tech can do for mankind. This isn't just a cheaper, safer way of training pilots and astronauts, and it isn't just a fantastic innovation in the world of entertainment. This is something that could, in a few years, drastically increase the quality of life for so many people in each economic class. If you're already savvy on the state of the VR industry or own a headset for yourself, this next section won't be of much use to you. You can skip to this time code to get straight to the really interesting stuff. Before I get into my little journey and the things I noticed along the way, let me dispel two major myths about VR, that it's ridiculously expensive and that it's ridiculously cumbersome. When most people think about what's stopping them from experiencing VR, they think that they'll first need a computer that'll set them back at least $600, and that the headset alone could cost anywhere from $400 to $1,000. Then they think about how they don't even have that big of an area to play in, so they'd constantly be bumping into things all around them. Well, these two things aren't necessarily true anymore, and they'll only get less true over the coming years. While Facebook has had its fair share of scandals and controversies, I have to give credit where it's due. They've done so much for the future of VR, probably more than any other company. While it should be made obvious by looking at my subscriber count, I'll clarify now that I'm not working under any sponsorship of any kind. Anyways, you could even say that Facebook's newest line of Oculus headsets, combined with Valve's recent announcement of Half-Life Alyx, has saved VR from fading into obscurity. It's inevitable that the price of VR gear will go down eventually, so we won't go too into how cheap this genuinely premium headset is, $400 for the Oculus Rift S. Instead, let's talk about something that was a bit less inevitable, inside-out tracking. This is the kind of head and hand tracking that doesn't require you to set up those infrared cameras all over your room, which, as small a detail as it might seem to some, was perceived as a huge hurdle that stopped a ton of people from being early VR adopters. With inside-out tracking, cameras inside the headset, combined with a bit of machine learning, track where your hands and head are. Base station tracking is more reliable, but as someone who uses the Vive Cosmos, the headset with the worst inside-out tracking of the big three, modern inside-out tracking is totally comparable to the base station experience, just with a few asterisks. Inside-out tracking was the butt of all VR jokes a few years ago, but Oculus invested heavily in R&D to make this stuff work, and on the Rift S, and I'm speaking from experience here, the hand tracking is absolutely incredible, especially considering the form factor and the low price of the headset. What the removal of base stations means is that I could take my laptop and an inside-out tracking headset to a friend's house and set up a perfect VR experience in 5 minutes tops, all with one of the cheapest premium headsets out there right now. However, Facebook took it one step further with the Oculus Quest, another $400 headset. This one, however, requires absolutely no computer, no wires whatsoever as a matter of fact. While it obviously isn't as powerful or high resolution as a PC-tethered headset, this is, according to testimony from Linus Tech Tips, Tested, and Thrillseeker, a perfectly fine VR experience. Let me repeat that. $400, no computer required, perfectly fine room scale VR. While that's absolutely no impulse purchase, Facebook should absolutely drop some more on marketing for this thing, because it's still so common to see people cite these outdated reasons for not wanting to get into VR. So anyways, this stuff is within arm's reach for most people, and is getting closer and closer every day.
Saber, Audio
So
Shield,
now that I've
and,
covered that and don't have to make 3
Pistol
VR
Whip.
videos in a
They're
row,
all rhythm
we can
games.
move on to what this essay is really about. It's inevitable that this tech will be minimized and get cheaper and cheaper. That's just what tech does. So what can this tech accomplish
What
for
I'm waiting
us?
for?
Well, as I started rebuilding my room in Steam VR Home, it soon became apparent. Steam VR Home essentially acts as a main menu for your VR experience. It's a little room you start out in with a couple of screens you can select your games from. You can download other rooms to use as your main menu, and you can decorate them with all sorts of neat things from props to community artwork posted to Steam community pages. So I wanted to find the most blank slatey room I could find to start decorating, and what better choice than the holodeck from Star Trek The Next Generation. Well, with that in place, my first thought was that whenever I'm navigating menus in VR, and not actually playing a game, I like to do it from my couch. So step 1 was to spawn in a couch prop and position it where mine was in real life. After a lot of tweaking with the fiddly controls, I got something that was a rough approximation of my sitting area of the couch, although the very modern couch was floating a few feet off the ground. So once I was comfortable with the placement, it was time for me to put it to the test. I walked to the other side of my room, and then I walked back and sat on my virtual couch for the first time. It was utterly uncanny. Needless to say that the biggest issue with immersion in VR is that your real environment doesn't correspond with the digital. Well, for the first time, for me, a part of it did. Before I knew it, I found myself taking my real, fragile phone out of my pocket and confidently tossing it onto my virtual couch, without a doubt in my mind that it would land on the real couch. I spawned a little display that would mirror my desktop display, moved it to a comfortable position, and threw on a Simple Flips video. Then I just laid down on my virtual couch looking at the virtual screen, the illusion of VR feeling less like an illusion than it ever had before.
Weird.
This was utterly mind-blowing, so after a few minutes I decided I had to keep at it. I quickly spawned a second couch and positioned it where my second couch was in real life, and the next thing I knew, I was excitedly jumping from sitting on one virtual couch to the other. This was starting to genuinely become my office space. There's a lot of tech traffic on the left side of my main couch, between monitors, microphones, a mouse and a keyboard, and all this other stuff. So I figured I should start recreating some of this stuff in my virtual space so that I wouldn't have to worry about bumping it with my feet. I figured I'd start with a small little bedside table I rest my monitor on. I use this small table specifically so I can easily clear my monitor out of my VR play area. Well, you unfortunately can't import custom models into Steam VR's prop selection, so I had to use a dinner plate to represent the top of this jury-rigged table. Upon looking for something to rest it on, I found this little marble
Do I
column
have
that would do the job nicely.
extreme
It
lag,
was a
or do
little
I just not
garish,
know
but
what that
hopefully I
was
can
in
recolor it
reference
to understate it
to?
some. I pulled out my recolor tool, and to my dismay, I
Are
was
you
only
back
able
at
to
me
color
talking
these
about
little
how
strips
to
that
draw
ran along the
bulge?
side. And that's when it occurred to me. I'm currently decorating my room in VR. So long as the things I
can't
can bump
remember anything
into
else I
are
said.
paralleled with objects of the same rough shape in VR, nothing else matters. I don't need to recreate this shifty-looking desk setup with the stereo
That was a
jammed into this
while ago.
brutalized kindergartner's cubby cabinet. I can make something nicer. The holodeck floor looked pretty rough, so I was hoping I could get some sort of rug set up in here to cover that. While I'm sad to report that there are no rugs in this prop list at this moment, I got a bit clever and I spawned in this Dota 2 mousepad, flipped it upside down to hide the logo, and scaled it up as large as it would go, before recoloring it to a tasteful dark teal and putting that over the most natural part of the floor. It was starting to get pretty cozy in here. As I was looking around, I bumped into my monitor, and upon looking at the virtual monitor I had in my VR room, I had the split-second thought of, wow, I could really clear up some of the clutter in my real room, considering that I could do so much of what I need to do on a daily basis in the VR room. Well, with the rug out of the way, I decided to stop putting it off. It was time to build this monstrosity of a desk. I found a nice desk model that roughly aligned with the dimensions of mine, and meticulously put it, along with some approximation of those cubbies, in their proper positions. Then I just had to shove in a computer tower
When I
and
was doing
something to
this
represent
too, where
these
they were
drawers.
remaking
Might as
their
well
whole
throw in a
room in
pagoda
VR.
on the other side of my couch to replace this ugly speaker and incense burner setup. After fiddling with all those unintuitive model manipulation controls, it was time for another break. Without ever taking off my headset, I walked around my new desk and laid back on the couch. This time I was watching Civi's video on Doom Platonia. Well, once I decided to get back to work, the first thing I needed to do was take off the headset and see what else needed to be added. I'd been lying on the couch just kicking back and watching a YouTube video for about 20 minutes, all in VR, and when I took off the headset, something magical happened. For a split second, I thought, oh cool, it's a different version of my room. Again, I couldn't possibly put to words how natural it was to just do my day-to-day relaxing in VR. So long as I was in a recreation of my own room, it felt about as real as any other time I'd spent just staring at a YouTube video on my phone. After more work was done, I found myself just chilling in this VR room watching YouTube videos the next night, less for the sake of curiosity and more because it was slowly becoming my preferred way to loaf around watching YouTube. I don't have a godlike computer, so I can't run any 3D games made after around 2003 while also running Steam VR Home, but for the games that my computer can handle running alongside VR, it's a fantastic way to play gamepad games. Me in my virtual room playing some Samurai Gun on a gigantic virtual monitor was utterly fantastic. I can't wait to try out Thief 2, System Shock 2, Deus Ex, Halo, and tons of other super immersive old school games with a setup like this. Sure, it doesn't take up my entire field of view, and it isn't true 3D,
cool if movie
but VR
theaters got
still
into
helped me
VR.
squeeze some
Like
more
if you could
immersion
go
out
to
of
a
some great
showing but
classics,
in
even
VR.
if I'm essentially just using
That
a
would be
glorified
cool.
flat screen setup.
So if
Unfortunately,
you're somewhere
I can't
where you
make these
can't get
virtual
to a
screens show
theater
my second
or
monitor, and I can't see my
you're
mouse's
disabled
cursor,
and you can't get to a
meaning
theater,
I have to
you're
interact
sick,
with the screens by
or you
pointing
just
at them with the
can't
controllers.
afford the in-person tickets.
Otherwise, I would absolutely love to edit my videos in a virtual setup like this. The increase in my productivity would be insane. No water bottles blocking my monitors, as many monitors as I want to help keep my mini instances of Windows Explorer organized, no phones or guitars in view to distract me, and I can make my main editing screen as large as I want, no problem. Once Steam VR Home gets some updates, and don't worry, I've got some ideas for what needs to be added, it's going to be a hell of an application.
No matter
Granted,
what,
I'm
you
really
always
pushing the app
have
to its limits with a project like this,
a
but
really
my
good
ideas
seat.
are small and relatively easy to implement, and the potential benefits could be enormous. Well, now it was time to put my bed and my
There's definitely
countertops
gotta
in place.
be.
This stuff was
If
much
there's not like
easier.
a mech
I just had to find
pilot
simple cabinet models
VR
that I could
game
scale
yet,
up
I'll
to
be
roughly
very,
cover the
very
relevant areas
surprised.
of my room. I painted them to a nice shade to accommodate the
Or at
holodeck
least people trying to
lighting,
work
and
on
I
it.
did
I
a
know
few
I've
laps
seen
around
something
the
like that
perimeter
in
of my room to make
a
sure that I
local
could still
arcade
walk around
actually.
without bumping
There's
into
like a VR
anything.
mech pilot
And I
thing.
totally
It
could.
was an arcade.
My real life bed merged with the walls of the holodeck, but that wasn't much of an issue. I just plopped down this much smaller bed and turn it sideways to signify the foot of my actual bed, and that'd be enough. Now, virtually every obstacle in my room was accounted for, at least up to the walls of the holodeck, but that was plenty for me. It was time to get creative. I instantly browsed the selection of community artwork for some of my favorite games, and I managed to piece together this cool display of Planescape Torment posters. I liked it so much that I put it directly opposite of my couch. I found this stylish, tasteful TF2 poster and decided it would look great going right over the back of the guest couch. There was a sweet mural of Freeman fighting HECUs and monsters in the vein of Doom artwork. It looked great going right behind my desk. And lastly, a fantastic large portrait of a New Vegas era NCR Ranger to go right behind where I sit. In my real room, I place a lot of value in that spot on the wall. It's where a lot of my favorite posters go, and if you're peeking your head in to say something to me, and I'm invariably sitting right here, they're impossible to ignore. This place was starting to feel like a home, but it still felt a little soulless in spite of the posters. My actual room is filled to the brim with little trinkets and junk on display, and while I'm sad to say that I couldn't spawn in any guitars, I was able to recreate most of that cluttered, homey feel by spawning in all sorts of trophies for my favorite games. These posters gain more and more tiers as you come closer to 100% achievements in their corresponding games.
Oh my
Pretty cool.
god.
Turns out there were a lot of games that I'd like to have a constant reminder of, so rather than cover every single countertop with trophies, I decided to just spawn in some of these trophy shelves, and they looked
I
fantastic.
can't remember
Now, with
that
a
one
quick look to the other side
episode.
of the room, I could remember some of my adventures in Kamaducho, Aperture Science,
that a
Black
fetish
Mesa,
thing?
New Eden, or hell. I don't have a lot of game merchandise in my actual room. It just plain isn't a good look to have in front of prospect romances, no matter how important they are to me. But these virtual trophies and posters serve the exact same
How about
purpose
just
as my
Jake
real
look?
ones do.
Wait, damn it.
If I look behind this couch in real life, I'm reminded of the time
Oh
I
my
spent
god,
with
I can't
Pink
remember
Floyd
how
and the
Jake looks.
Doors, and if I look behind it in VR, I'm reminded of my adventures through the Mojave Wastes.
Okay, I can't remember
Before
how
moving
Jake
on,
looks.
I'd like to point out that Steam VR Home probably isn't the application to make my vision of the future a
Lump.
reality. It could be, depending on the direction they want to take it with future updates, but it isn't yet. Firstly, we're going to need a few changes that I may as well list here. I don't want to have to constantly worry about moving my couches out of sync with my real ones, so a way to lock objects in place so that it can't be moved at all would be great. Think of locking the taskbar in Windows. We should be able to black out everything in our homes other than our screens for a truly immersive viewing experience. We absolutely need to be able to download and spawn custom props from the workshop so that we're not stuck with a floating
There you go,
couch,
that's the best I'm doing.
carpets, or just the ability to recolor individual faces of our environment's geometry would be nice. We need the ability to disable teleporting and snap turning,
And now
as
he
every
is
time I
gone.
accidentally teleported, I would have to reload my home to get back in alignment. And for that matter, we should be able to replace the spawn point. We need to be able to show a second monitor on our virtual monitor setups, so I can get a genuine dual monitor experience in VR. And for that matter, virtual screens would be nice too. And as I said earlier, we really need to be able to see our cursors so that this can be used as a productivity tool. It'd be nice to have different applications available in the workshop, which could be summoned like we do our Steam friends list. I could just pop Discord or Twitter chat over by the far end of the couch. Lastly, and this is a big one, let us save a prop layout relative to our spawn location, and move that layout to other environments. With this, we'd
You're
be able to
welcome.
move
This
our
is the
office setup
best I
to
can do.
anywhere we wanted. What if one day I don't feel like working in the holodeck? I want to be on Mount Fuji in the spring. This way, I wouldn't have to
Yeah, I also want
meticulously
his to be
rebuild my
fuchsia.
room every
This
time
is
I
just
wanted
the
to
color
change
of
up
this
scenery.
armor.
I could just move my couches and computer monitors to any environment I wanted. This is the one that has the major implications. Now, I'm probably not the best person to be making this video. There's no point dancing around it. I've got a pretty cool room. It's a really nice place to hang out with people. Enough room for parties, enough couch space
It
for
is a
LAN
great room.
gaming, a nice little TV I sometimes hook up to my PC to watch shows and play games in bed, and all the guitars I'll ever need. Other than my lack of a door between me and the rest of the house, this place is sweet, which again means that I don't have all that much cause to want to escape to a VR upgrade of this room. However, I'd ask you to look past that and try to see the potential that I'm getting at. Plenty of people all over the world have much worse homes. A single, small tube TV from the early 2000s, rented apartments that don't allow you to cover the walls with posters, a depressing lack of windows or sufficient lighting, or hey, maybe they're just in a cramped house in a high-density neighborhood surrounded by nothing but concrete.
What you're looking at are cages. Not for animals, but people.
What?
Old people mostly. And this is their entire world, with room for only a few prized possessions. 79-year-old Dai
My
Yuan
room is
Po
pretty
has lived
great,
this
so I
way
would have
for
to make
30
something
years.
completely different.
Does he consider this home?
I don't know.
It's a total fantasy area. I would draw everything in it.
I don't care who you are, that's depressing. To go outside
Yeah.
and see nothing but concrete, not a tree in sight, cars blocking up half your view, barely able to get a glimpse of the sky behind all the high-rises. Again, I really need to emphasize that I have absolutely no way of getting across how real VR can feel. And I'm just using a modern first-gen headset. These devices are going to get so much better in virtually every way. I mean, hell, Oculus is working on controller-free hand tracking. Sure, this tech could never truly replicate or replace the feeling of stepping out onto a porch in a home built into the Himalayas, but an artificial recreation of those mountains, at least as realistic as my experience, which will be looked at as quaint in 5 years, is a hell of a lot better than a lot of people's living conditions. Can't afford TV? One in VR is free. Can't afford a view? One in VR is free. This is why I say that my major update suggestion for Steam VR Home has such
I hope they'll
major
keep them free.
implications. If you have, say, a single chair in a dingy apartment that's just plain depressing to be in and day out, you could, using VR, move that chair to any beautiful place you wanted, real or otherwise. Sure, it isn't real, and you'll know it isn't real, but you can genuinely fool yourself for a moment, and what that could do for someone who's having a crappy day and isn't looking forward to going home to their crappy apartment need not be explained. If this video, in my experience, proved anything, it's that the tech and software isn't where it needs to be for this to be anything but a fun little experiment on my part, but it also shows that the tech and software is hardly even half a decade from being where it needs to be. Then just give it 10 or so more years before the price drops and this stuff becomes as common as smartphones. I'm genuinely looking forward to getting back into my VR space and lounging around watching YouTube, and it won't be long before we all have a VR home.
That's a cool idea for VR use. Main thing I want it for, though, is still rhythm games. I want to be doing something.
Here it is, my test results. Can you hear my heart beating? Oh, the white man's science is amazing, ain't it?
This show is great.
Oh, no, this can't be. It says I'm 102% African with a 2% margin of error. Why, Lord? Why, Lord? Why?
That guy, I swear.
How did this geeky-looking dad in his saggy underpants become the biggest badass TV hero ever? Well, here's every single episode of Breaking Bad in one video to explain how. Here we go, Season 1, Episode 1.
There's someone who actually thinks Walter's a badass. I think people who think Walter's a badass, like, fundamentally misunderstand the show.
Than wrapping their heads around how flames can change color using
this one is very long, and the music is very, the sound is very low.
Pay for his mediocre house. A house which needs a new boiler.
Oh yeah, I remember Soma. I saw that one was really good.
And the overdue bills are piling up. But even more tragic.
Let's see if there's anything in my watch later that's a bit shorter. Because I just want to like get the lines on this and possibly slap some colors on, but I may do that later. I'm kind of getting a headache. Kind of want to go draw some stuff. Well, I may am drawing some. I want to go cook some stuff. I'm drawing something and looking at the Drawfee episode, so. I want to watch my fellow millennials be confused.
Welcome to the wonderful world of Watcher. What are we doing?
Yeah, Metaverse looks kind of stupid. Maybe it'll get better in the future. I don't know.
As you may notice, Stephen Lim is not here this time. He's
like, do they know VR chat already exists?
By a Pennywise.
And who better to replace him than the host of the new
people
Watcher series,
don't
Worth the
get
Shot,
Batman
Ricky
if they think he has to be constantly just fighting. He's a detective. The world's greatest detective.
Steven, I can never replace you.
Well, you quite literally just did.
Well,
But,
you did, but we all love Steven. Ricky, thank you for being here. Are you excited for this?
I'm nervous. I watched you guys slay it last time. I'm like, how did you guys know these things?
I think you're probably going to do much better than both of us. I consider you much more hip than me. And I think me saying the word hip probably shows how hip I actually am.
Well, speaking of hip, let's introduce our social media wizard, Simone Malik.
Hello, I'm Simone, social media coordinator at Watcher. I am 21 years old, I'm an Aquarius, and I in fact do not remember 9/11. So that qualifies me as Gen Z person. So I was tasked to pick some words from online spaces when Gen Z people usually interact. So these might be a tiny bit harder than last time.
Ricky, would you consider yourself in tune with Gen Z? Do you watch Euphoria?
Yeah.
That's my only metric is, do you watch Euphoria?
I've watched one episode of Euphoria, so I think I'm privy to some Gen Z slang.
Do you like Timothy Chalamet?
Even Tony Stark can have
like
some dimension to him.
They're like Gen Z things.
Is that a Gen Z thing? I only know
Like,
Jack
I kind of
Harlow
liked
from,
how in some of the Marvel movies they gave him, like, panic attacks.
Do you know who Jack Harlow is?
I don't know who
Kind of grounded him a little bit.
I feel better.
You're gonna have a whiteboard and you either have to explain it in a sentence or use it correctly in like conversation on Twitter, on TikTok, whatever. At the end, we're gonna have the person who gets the least amount of points read a post from social media about them that we personally picked.
Nasty.
Great. I like that.
Nasty.
If I were you, I would win this. Or try to win it.
Before we get into our little competition, we do have a word from our sponsor, Word Farm.
Yeehaw!
I'd also like to see an opposite where, like,
After that.
Hey there, folks.
millennials
This
try to
episode is brought
understand
you
boomer
by
slang or
Word
something.
Farm Adventure. You know, I love being creative with my words and my writing. And Word Farm Adventure is a free game where you solve crossword puzzles and complete word Scrabble missions on your phone. It's a great way to stimulate your thinking skills, and it's fun. It's only the first game ever to cross over amazing word puzzle games with Scape Adventures. And speaking of games, there are so many levels to choose from, with amazing locations to rebuild, such as the
I'd like a better sponsors. I love this show.
and many more. The more levels you win, the quicker you get to rebuild. Work through puzzles, level up, and design and renovate your farm. Install Word Farm Adventure for free on the Android or Apple App Store today. And if you download for free using the link in the description, you'll also get a welcome bonus. I like the sound of that. Thank you, Word Farm Adventures, for sponsoring this episode. Now, back to the show.
Let's get to it.
Okay, so the first word you have to explain is
Yeah.
himbo.
Can I get a spelling?
It's H-I-M-B-O, Ricky.
Right there, you can see it.
Oh!
he needed it spelled out for him.
Is cheating allowed here? Like we could...
So instead of like actually
Don't make me put
murdering
up my
them,
dividers like I
he
did in middle school.
puts them in an institution and says, "Get help."
I'll go first. How about that? A hot, dumb, but overall very nice and sometimes funny man. Brock just
Isn't
said
necessarily
play it
always
by
the perfect
ear
solution,
instead of
but
ear.
At least
What
he's
a
trying
himbo.
to help.
That's a really good
Even though the
definition.
villain sometimes just refuses help.
That's a good himbo name.
So I have someone's second cousin who they do not want present. So an example would be, why is himbo at this barbecue?
Well, now I feel like I've got an edge in this competition. 'Cause that is a wild definition, my friend.
Now, himbo is what I'm drawing.
Sort of like a hot, basic dude. UPS guy Morty is trying to break up Grandma in Chester, but no way she's falling for his himbo-ass SMBA.
See, that's the vague usage I'm talking about
To
there.
be fair, Brock is more of a himbo name than Morty.
I agree. Morty is not a himbo name.
Himbo means a guy who is not very biased on the intelligence level, but he's very hot or good looking and usually respects women. Points to Ryan and Shane because they got it right.
I like the creative license there, though. Like, you clearly had no idea.
No idea. I took a shot in the dark.
Yeah, I respect that.
So the second word is very specific. It's Y/N.
What?
Yes, no?
Oh my gosh, this is brutal.
I think every one of these Gen Z slang videos ages me about 10 years.
Yes, exactly.
How is yes, no?
About grandma.
Like, what?
All right. I wrote slang for, you know? Like, I just didn't think Stevie was a great bartender. Y/N? you know?
I second that one. So I did go the obvious route.
You have lovely handwriting.
Really?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's really,
Thank you.
really...
Really?
I mean, I'm
Oh my
obviously
God.
not talking to you.
Somebody drank their rude juice this morning.
I put, when you want to proposition something kind of sexual. So I wrote, Netflix after dinner, Y/N. Something sexual is happening
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Well, I guess this could be sexual. I said, I mean, it seems like you're just posing a question and asking for a yes or no response. Want to spend
isn't that
Saturday
what it
afternoon
means?
helping me shovel the skunk bones out Grandma's shed. YN? LMAO.
It can't be as simple as yes/no. Y/N is what I see on DMV forms. That's not fun.
So this word comes from fan fiction. It means your name. It's used
What?
when you're like reading a POV fan fiction about someone and then you insert
Oh,
your
I don't read
name, so it's like
fanfics.
it includes you.
Oh.
But like in Gen Z slang, it means you're living the main character life. Like Liam Payne's girlfriend is old fan from One Direction.
So Dr. Stephen Strange would say, hey there, YN, what are you doing with my cape? Like that?
What?
Get your hands off
That
my
man
cape.
could have gotten help, but
guys,
instead
I
he
know
went and
that neither of you
studied
got it right, so
martial arts.
Yeah, that's fine.
We
I
all
guess
just
it's sort of
himbos
like
here.
getting help.
Just a
Wait,
trio
no,
of
himbo
himbos.
has to be.
3 himbos, baby.
I believe in you guys. You got this. Flop era.
How confident are you in this one?
Not confident. Flop era. A phase of life where you are habitually whiffing it. Oh yeah, watchers making Steven bartend again. They're really in their flop era. How about that?
I have
What the hell?
circa 2014 when Vine ruled the world. So example would be, I'm so glad we have TikTok. No more that garbage flop era. This is why I imagine Gen Z thinks, because I love
I know they love TikTok. I can't think of less of a flop era than the Vine days. Good God.
I love Vine. Loved I still love Vine.
I still love Vine.
I absolutely would not read fanfic if anyone wrote them of my characters, unless they got the characterization right. Otherwise, those aren't my characters.
Cleaning the skunk bones, so she's calling in Morty to finish the job.
Like, I'll see people advertising their fics on the Tumblrs and sending them around.
All these and make a novel out of it.
I think he's trying to work some stuff out.
And even just the title will make the characters that they're writing about seem so incorrect for how they're written. I'll be like,
and it's just really bad. So when
you just turn them into basic tropes. Those aren't the characters. You just made up your own.
So obvious.
It's
Why
okay.
did my brain think of
Yeah,
that?
that one is very
You have a
obvious.
wonderful brain, Ricky.
I can see why you would think this is too obvious.
Right.
Because flop isn't a new word.
Yes.
And also, in your defense, we were led astray with YN, which seemed obvious, and then it wasn't.
Right.
Simone's throwing us some curveballs this week.
Yeah.
Points to both Ryan and Shane.
Ryan, we're tied right
You
now.
guys are killing
We're
it.
buds.
This is not
Ricky,
looking
you're doing good
for
too.
me.
Yeah, you're doing good too.
You know, Ricky?
You let us think about Vine, and that's a gift.
And I think you bring the best out of Shane and I.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, really?
You're like our muse.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm like your guys' stepchild.
You kind of are.
Really? Thanks.
If you loved YN, then you're gonna love the next word.
Oh boy.
And it's OOMF.
What?
Oomph.
Good luck, guys. You got this. I trust you.
Oomph.
I think I whiffed this one hard. I think I might be in my flop era.
The sound you make
I think
when you oomph.
OOMF might mean out of my face.
Out of my face.
So like waiter brings me a limb cocktail and I say, get that weak stuff, OOMF.
He does say this a lot. Sometimes when we're ghost hunting, Ryan gets very in the zone.
Yeah.
And I'll
That
come
would
up
make
to him
sense
and I'll
out of
be
my
like,
face.
"Oh, this place looks scary, huh?" When he's getting his ghost gear on, and he'll say, "Get the fuck out of my face." He has genuinely said it a few times.
It's the meaner you get with it too, the funnier it is. Get the fuck out of my face.
Cracks me up.
Mine was an expression
Guys,
you let out
Indian
when
or
something
something.
bad happens to you. 1B, stands for ooh.
Oh.
So, somebody help! I'm falling off the skateboard. Oomph.
That's good.
That is good. I
That's
like
so
that.
very guttural.
Yeah, like onomatopoeia kind of. Right?
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah.
I think I got it right. I think it's one of my followers.
Oh shit.
I could be wrong
That's
about
gotta
that.
be it.
One of my followers DM'd me a pic of Grandma and Morty having Quiznos at the mall food court. Trouble brewing.
No LMAO on this one?
No,
Yeah.
nothing, not a laughing
That is
matter.
not funny.
Not a laughing
Yeah.
matter.
As Shane said, OOMF means one of my followers. It's used usually on Twitter when you want to gossip about someone.
How did
or, like,
my
tweet
face
about
make so
someone.
much more sense?
Oh, did he know that or did he
It
guess
was
that?
like no, I did know that. It was in the recesses of my mind. It's not a phrase I've ever used. I've seen people use it on Twitter though.
I've never seen that on Twitter.
I'm very plugged into
I
Twitter.
don't use Twitter. Twitter is
If you're
garbage.
plugged into twitter.com, then you should know the next one, which is ratioed.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Yeah, I know this one.
I trust you guys. Don't fail
What do
me.
you mean, sure?
Well, we're very online.
Don't you look at my answer, Ricky. Ratioed. When you get more replies than likes on a tweet indicating you done fucked up. Anger is flowing like the Nile.
Isn't that what it
LOL, you
means?
see Alex get ratioed for that trash ass take?
I put definition when your cocktail pour is perfect.
And that's a
I think
great
Twitter
plug
got
for
worse
Worth
when
a
yeah,
all
Shot
the
yeah,
for
that
worst
is-
people
yeah,
of
that's
Tumblr
right.
left after
Wait,
the
that's not
porn
a
ban.
website.
It was the one good thing the
YouTube.com.
porn ban did.
Jesus
If we could just
Christ.
bring back the
Yeah, I will
porn
say
and
the
not
ratio
tell
on
anyone,
Ricky's drinks.
that would be great for all the erotic artists who are still
Primo
there.
ratio.
He
I-
blew it.
I
He did
love-
not get this right at
No,
all.
he
but
didn't, but I'd
it's
love to
gonna
get
be a good
ratioed
show.
by Ricky.
Steven, once again, that is not a ratio drink.
Oh, now he's coming for Steven. Let's go. Yeah.
And I said, when the quote tweets and disparaging replies far outweigh the likes, can be applied IRL to, i.e. a hot take that gets dunked on. Chester lashing out on twitter.com said some nasty things about Grandma and Morty. Got ratioed.
I am not sure about any like bartender slang, which Ricky might got right. Ratioed means an original tweet gets dunked by a bunch of tweets that have more impressions and engagement than the original tweets. Usually for a bad opinion. It's a whole Twitter thing, and Ryan and Shane perfectly described it.
All aboard the victory train.
It's a whole Twitter thing.
That's what you want to understand.
The next word is material girl.
I'm flying blind on this one.
Is this deceptively easy?
I think so.
Okay, let's go.
This shows how confident in my answer I am because I started it with kind of. Kind of like poking fun at oneself for liking material things like Gucci, a la Cardi B. Oh yeah, you like these pumps? You know me, I'm just a material girl.
Mine was very similar. I put someone who values designer fashion over anything else. I spent my rent money on this Prada bag. Yes, I'm a material girl.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. Similar, but I'm turning it on its head and saying maybe like a sarcastic reference to one's fashion or style, like in a self-deprecating way, i.e. wearing sweatpants to Grandma and Morty's engagement party, material girl, LMAO, SMDH.
Oh no, the weird fetish art is always, you're not gonna escape the weird fetish art.
Wow, Grandma.
So
It's
material
impossible.
girl means someone who prioritizes like material possessions, but kind of in like ironical way. That's important about it. It's ironic. So Shane could say, "I just quit my full-time jobs to go play with puppets." Material girl.
So I
Something
was
like
kind of
that.
right when I said kind of like poking fun at oneself.
Yeah, I would say that.
Let's go!
Ryan got the closest, but I would give points to everyone.
Thank you.
No,
Yeah,
wait
we're
a second
gonna
here,
be
Simone.
generous.
Wait a second here. I don't think Shane's is correct. Like, you're still using the material items, whereas
Yeah,
Shane...
but the example she gave about puppets would speak to mine being more of like self-deprecating.
But the puppets are luxury items. Though.
Yeah, how did I
No,
do this
they're
last
not.
time?
I think they're luxury items.
You know, we're generous here, so we're gonna give points to everyone for this one. The final word is
I'm
my
not going
poor
to this one
little
the same
meow
or
meow.
not.
Oh, God.
Actually, you know what? Ryan is my poor little meow meow.
So Ryan has uttered these words.
I have. And I still don't know what it means. Just trying to figure it out. Context clues. Like a helpless and clueless little cute person. Like a cat, like a kitten. This was the Tumblr post. Ryan is my poor little meow meow. I believe, was it something along those lines?
Yeah, exactly that.
Okay, so my definition is when one hurts one's nether regions, spelling, when performing any act. I tried doing a death drop after watching Drag Race and floundered. My poor little meow meow.
Ricky
Oh,
should get a
no.
point for
That's
this,
pretty good.
Honestly.
Is that so much more graceful than saying like, ah, my balls?
Yeah, exactly.
Or, you know, or like, hit me right in the poor little meow meow.
That's pretty good. We should redefine
I think
the word.
he's onto something here. I think he should get points for
I
creativity.
really think you should. I said, I assume it's just an endearing term for one of your online faves in Morty's engagement toasty called Grandma's Poor Little Meow Meow. Oh.
He also wrote no fucking clue.
No fucking clue.
My poor little meow meow is used on social media to describe characters that are morally gray, mostly evil, like Loki or Kylo Ren.
Ah.
A villain that you shouldn't defend, but you're like, oh, he's my poor little meow meow.
That
Because
makes
he's-
sense now. It must have been.
Why meow meow?
Yeah,
Why meow meow?
It originated in the BDS fandom, and then it just went everywhere. But I just wanted to describe to Ryan,
It's 'cause
poor
I
little
killed the
meow
professor.
meow. They mentioned that you're like one of the biggest villains because you killed the professor.
So we whiffed it.
I would give points to Shane because he did mention that it's online.
What is this, Make-A-Wish? This is like unbelievable. He's getting all these charity points.
I did specifically say online.
But there's nothing to do with it being like anything morally gray
I mean, this is
or
all
an evil.
true. This is all true.
He wrote no fucking clue after it.
I'm happy not to take the point.
Unbelievable. I think the point should go to Ricky.
The first emoji is
I'm gonna be horrible at this one.
the clown emoji.
Oh.
I mean,
You got this,
That-
Ricky.
This is
Yes,
broad. This
I
is broad.
think I know it.
I'm gonna laugh if I get this one wrong. Clown emoji, used to describe someone who is stupid or just plain wrong in a situation. You know, a clown. Example, wow, so you actually think Cars is a good film. Clown emoji.
I wrote, when you feel played. Real clowns get paid a decent salary, while I'm here doing it for free. Clown emoji.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's actually, I think that
You'd be
qualifies.
self-referential
Similar
too.
to Ryan, someone making an absolute fool of himself / holding a trash opinion. Chester showing up to the engagement party trying to fist fight Morty. It's clown emoji, SMTH. Ryan, you've seen this where
Yeah.
it'll be the meme of someone stating an opinion and the person just slowly putting clown makeup on.
Exactly, yeah, that like
Now that's
reaction.
funny. I
Yeah.
don't care who you are.
Guys, lucky day. I feel like all of you got it right.
Wow.
I agree.
Clown emoji means when a person is delusional but kind of like self-aware about it. So like when you say, I still believe the professor is alive, I'm such a clown, this is how you would use it.
Me thinking that Ryan would win and the professor would still be alive. Clown make.
Yeah.
Next, the bank card emoji.
I mean, what the
I want the
fuck?
professor to come back.
This
I
looks like
missed
some
up
sort
in
of
history.
electrical diagram.
It seems obvious, but when we had that one of the bugs eating ass, that one really threw me.
Isn't the point of slang for it to be a little bit faster? This looks like it would take me a while to make this diagram.
I think looking at it does help, because if I looked at the bugs longer, maybe I'd realize they're dancing.
Yeah. Card emoji. When you're spending recklessly and your finances are in ruin. Just bought another pair of sneakers. Card emoji.
Okay.
Maybe.
When your credit card takes a hit from making pointless purchases.
There it is.
I paid for 3 bottles of still water at a restaurant when I should have had tap.
Suggesting you're compelled to buy or spend money on something very pricey. Grandma and Morty booking medieval times for their wedding. Card.
That actually sounds pretty fun.
That sounds dope as hell. They're gonna
Fun
something.
Sorry guys, I don't think any of you got it right.
Yeah.
What does
The
it mean?
combination of these 2 emojis usually represents shut up and take my money. So it's like, we drop
Oh,
you
okay, I was
Professor
thinking
merch.
I'll remind you, mine says when you're compelled to buy or spend
Oh my
money.
god, this guy trying to siphon off more points.
Just saying, I think that's pretty close, but hey, I'm happy to let this one go.
Yeah, let's this one go.
Okay.
And finally, we have the smiley face emoji, the classic one.
What?
Is this a joke?
Okay, how do you feel about this one?
Usually used ironically, right?
Another shot in the dark. Let's see if I hit something.
So let's give it a go.
Smiling but sad inside. Kind of like, it's like you're covering up your true emotion. Example, someone says, hey, the professor is actually alive. Me, smile emoji.
Okay.
A sarcastic smile indicating everything is fine. My oven caught on fire again.
Aww.
Clearly not happy about something used sarcastically. Morty told me he's gonna make sure my name is left out of Grandma's will. Smiley, smiley, smiley. What? Why is he even thinking about that?
What in the world?
It means the opposite. You're not smiling. You're dead on the inside. And I think that's very nice. Switch in the meaning.
Yay!
That was the saddest slash. Was it almost fake?
That was the smile emoji.
That was the smile emoji of applauses.
Yeah.
So, the winner is, with 8 points, drumroll, Shane. The person who ended up being second is Ryan with 6 points. And the person with the least amount of points who tried his best is Ricky.
You did perfectly slot in for Steven.
Can this be like Mario Party where there's like bonus stars at the end?
No, no bonus stars. Those always were the worst.
So now, Ricky, you have to read a post that we prepared for you.
Oh, I forgot.
I promise it's not that bad, because we try to be nice, because you're a newbie here.
Okay, good.
Oh,
I don't want Ricky to feel bad.
Please read that.
I don't think we as a Watcher community talk about how much of a daddy Ricky Wang is at Watcher. Oh my god.
This is a really. That's
I also
sweet.
like the user's name.
Daddy Vladdy Putin.
That is a compliment, I think. Yeah.
Well, you're all going to be talking about it a lot more starting next week.
That's
once Worth
right.
the Shot
Worth the
premieres,
Shot.
Starring Daddy.
Starring Daddy Ricky Wang.
I think I just proved I am kind of a dad today.
I don't think
am
they're talking
touched.
about it in that
I don't think they're talking about a father, Ricky.
Now I'm curious to see what Ryan and Shane. What do they get?
If you want to see Shane and I read ours, you have to follow us over on TikTok.
It's a Gen Z video. That's where they all are anyway.
That's true. That's like telling them to breathe oxygen.
Yeah. Ricky, thank you for doing this for us. Everybody, get ready, because next week you're going to see a lot more of Ricky, because Worth a Shot premieres on Watcher.
I'm in it with Mari. We're blessed by Ricky's drink-making abilities. It's a truly delightful show. You're going to want to check it out.
He made a tasty little cocktail for me as well. Simone, thank you once again for taking us on this wonderful journey of language.
I am once again asking, please follow We Are Watcher on social media. Thank you.
She's good at her job.
Also, you can find us on Patreon, too.
Oh, patreon.com/Watcher.
If you want some more bonus content.
Probably should have done it at the top of the video, but hey, who gives a shit? All right. We'll see you next week, everybody, for an all-new series with our friend Ricky Wang. Until then, farewell.
Subscribe.
Yeah.
You
I just want to do a quick taste test. Oh God. It's actually not that disgusting, but I don't think I could use that. Hi everyone, I am Ricky Wang. I am a professional bartender and mixologist here in LA. So I've been bartending for over 10 years, ranging from sushi restaurants to nightclubs. So I've done the gamut. Today, my friends at Watcher have challenged me to make a one-of-a-kind drink with one special ingredient. Let's find out what that ingredient is and who gave it to me. So I wouldn't say I feel confident, but I feel very excited to tackle on whatever is given to me. Oh my God. Okay, it's a letter from Ryan. Oh my gosh, it's a whole letter, look at this. Dear Ricky, welcome to the Watcher universe. We're so excited to finally have a real bartender in the fold. For today's challenge, I've been told to choose an ingredient I love that you will somehow turn into a miracle cocktail. And as much as I love you as a friend, I ain't about to make this easy. But fret not, cause you're Ricky fucking Wang, so I know you'll slay this. Or it will be a beautiful disaster happening in slow motion. Win-win. Anywho, today you'll be making, hold for effect, a cocktail out of, ah shit, the hold should have been here. Hot Cheetos! Godspeed, Spider-Man. Your friend, Ryan. Okay, Hot Cheetos. I love Hot Cheetos. I met Ryan through his beautiful fiance, Mari, who's one of my closest friends. And when he found out I was a bartender, at parties, I would always be making random drinks for him. So we bonded over me making him cocktails. So here we are now. I am scared, I am nervous. I haven't had a Hot Cheeto in decades. Wow, I forgot how good Hot Cheetos were. For me, level 3.5 on spice. There's a million things going through my head. This is a challenging ingredient, but we're gonna do it, I hope. All right, first of all, F you, Ryan. Just kidding. I have to know, is there even cheese in Hot Cheetos? There's cornmeal, there's cheddar cheese. Milk cheese, there's onion powder. I'm kind of stumped. Okay, because here's the thing. There are spicy drinks. Spicy drinks are pretty common, like a spicy margarita. To be honest, I'm not sure how cheese is going to play into it. And my thing is, jalapenos you could just like muddle, but you can't muddle Hot Cheetos. I mean, I guess you can, but it's gonna be dusty. I want this to still be a like $4 sign cocktail. That's my goal. If I achieve it or not is beyond me. Okay, my initial instinct, and this is going to be a cheat, is I want to crush the Hot Cheetos to make a rim for the cocktail. That's a start. But I feel like that's cheating because it's like, how am I gonna incorporate it into the drink? I don't wanna take the easy way out. Here's also where it gets tricky. I don't want this drink to be a Hot Cheetos flavored drink. I want to counteract the spice with something refreshing. So I want to add like cucumber and watermelon. I'm gonna do a spicy watermelon margarita. But how am I gonna incorporate the Hot Cheetos in the, I've seen this technique before where they make like a ice, like a chili ice. Maybe I can make a Hot Cheetos ice? Does that sound wrong? I want to incorporate some technique that I've seen really skilled bartenders use where people sous vide ingredients into their liquor. What if I sous vide Hot Cheetos into a tequila, made Hot Cheetos ice,
wow, I must have the
and a
worst
watermelon
lag.
margarita?
Jesus Christ.
Someone tell me to
It's
stop.
gonna be ending in a minute, so.
This is crazy. I really want to use a sous vide. So I want to bring the sous vide. I am going to grab all the ingredients I need and some tools from home. All right, we are back and we have everything we need. The first step that I'm doing is the Fresno chili ice because that is going to take at least a couple hours to freeze. I traveled far and wide to find These Fresno chili peppers, they didn't have this anywhere. And I know this exists. So after my third store, we have some Fresno chili ice. So yay! They are a little spicier than jalapenos, but I wanted the ice to be red. Since it's hot Cheetos, I like a good theme, you know what I mean? Green ice, meh. Red ice, hot Cheetos. Also, Ryan likes spice, and since this drink is for him, I'm going to make it extra spicy. I'm going to prepare 2 different ice options because I don't want to be screwed with a nasty ice in the end. The first one, I am making Fresno chili. I am blending with water. And the second ice that I'm going to be doing is the Hot Cheetos Fresno chili ice. So I'm going to be blending these chilies with water and freezing them. This way your drink isn't too hot, you still get the essence of it. I want to take about 3-4 peppers, depending on how big they are. Usually for ice, you want to use about like an 8-to-1 ratio. As long as the color is right, I'm okay. And we're going to blend.
All right.
So, bon appetit.
That's gotta
That's
be
a beautiful
weird.
color. I'm gonna give this a quick taste test because I want this spicy for Ryan.
Okay. Oh my god, it's way later than I meant to be on. Okay, well,
oh my god. Okay, this is not for children. I mean, it wouldn't be anyway. It's actually really good. I think it's the perfect amount of spice because it's gonna be in the ice, so it's not like the drink is that spicy. I think that is beautiful. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to strain this out. Then we're gonna take this beautiful solution and put this in a ice mold. Okay, so this is the first ice. For the second experimental ice, I'm gonna be blending the Fresno chili with hot Cheetos. I really don't know how I feel about cheese in a drink. You know, we're here to play.
Needing to be, honestly, but I'm glad I got some
A
doodles
sprinkle
going.
of hot Cheetos. Oh my, I don't know how I feel about this. Oh God. Ooh, the spice is like when you cut an onion, but it's like the chili is killing me. Oh, it doesn't smell that bad.
All right, I gotta sign
this looks
off
a little
for
bit
now.
wrong, but
Watching this video makes me want to mix some more of the
sounds
soup I
crazy.
made yesterday.
I kind of want to add more hot Cheetos. It's not
Which
Cheeto
was,
yet. It's actually not that bad. It's actually kind of nice.
Here.
It's like a hot Cheeto.
Streamlabs, you
soup.
okay? Okay,
Oh
Streamlabs.
my God, it's not even
okay.
straining. This is all for you, Ryan. We'll be able to
I
tell
want to
difference
make some of the
because
soup
one
I
is
made
cloudy
yesterday. It
and
was
one
a
is clear.
mushroom
All right, I want to pop these in the
meatball soup,
freezer.
and it turned
Let's
out really
see which
good,
one I
so
end up
I'm gonna go
using.
make some of that. Fuck. I'll go on that later. And yeah, I'll be back later either drawing more or doing some other type of art thing, possibly. Goodbye for now.